Chapter 27. Why are you in Shin City? Ren Baqin asked curiously. I'm working here now, Dong Haiqing said with a smile. I didn't know you were here. Alright, let's continue our small talk later. Let's go in first. Qin Qing placed one hand on Dong Haiqing's waist and the other on Ren Baqin's back. After the few of them entered the room and ordered, Dong Haiqing asked, Where are you working now? Squatting at home. Ren Baqin answered casually. Dong Haiqing smiled. I'm so envious of your freedom. If he could stay at home, drive a good car, and go in and out of a high-end hotel without a change in expression, then his family must be rich. It was just as he had guessed. There are still a few university classmates in Xinjiang. Do you want to join us for a gathering? It depends on the situation. I often go to other places, Ren Baqin replied. Moreover, he wasn't interested in the reunion at all. He had no contact with any of his former classmates. I'll contact you when the time comes. You can go if you have time. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. His attitude was friendly, completely different from when he was in school. If he was treated like this by Dong Haiqing in school, he might be happy for a while and even fantasize about it. But after being in society for a year, he clearly knew what the reason was. Do you remember Qinbing? Dong Haiqing asked again. Ren Baqin thought about it and had some impression of her. She was a petite and exquisite young lady. She was pretty, but her legs were a little short. Sitting on the chair, he looked like he was 1.65 meters tall, but in reality he was only 1.58 meters tall. He nodded. She had a good impression of you back then. Dong Haiqing pursed her lips and smiled. Ren Baqin was slightly surprised. This was the first time he had heard of this. But after that, you didn't do anything and she wasn't a proactive person, so it was left unsettled. She is also in Shin City now, Dong Haiqing said. However, the truth was that Qinbing had once thought of taking the initiative. But after hearing what she said, she finally gave up. If he could bring Qinbing and Ren Baqin together, it would be beneficial to him. After all, she didn't have much confidence in dealing with this rich second-generation heir. But his height, appearance, and background were all in line with her expectations. Since she wasn't confident, she might as well take the side route through Ren Baqin. Might be beneficial. Even if there weren't any benefits, Ren Baqin and Qinbing would still remember his kindness, right? Ren Baqin could also be of help to her. If Ren Baqin knew what Dong Haiqing was thinking, he would definitely be shocked. To think that they even had ideas about him. Moreover, it had only been a year since he entered society, and he had turned a dazzling figure in the eyes of many people in the ivory tower into such a state. After exchanging phone numbers with Ren Baqin, Dong Haiqing shifted her attention back to Qin Qing. Ren Baqin heaved a sigh of relief. He did not have much of an impression of Qinbing. If she really wanted to matchmake the two of them, Ren Baqin would have a headache. After all, he wasn't good at rejecting people. After that, Ren Baqin spent most of his time listening to Qin Qing and Dong Haiqing's conversation. Occasionally he would interrupt them. With Dong Haiqing around, it was inconvenient for the two of them to talk about many things, so they just had a simple chat. After leaving the restaurant, Ren Baqin rejected Qin Qing's suggestion to go to the bar for a drink. He watched as the two of them got into Qin Qing's car and drove home. He placed the silver, spices, and sweet potatoes in a bag and placed them on the bed. Ren Baqin had only been online for a while before he hugged the bag and lay down. He was afraid that he would move his arms when he fell asleep and leave something behind. These were things that he would need when he returned. He needed the silver to rent the shop, the spices were related to the bet with the imperial kitchen, and the sweet potatoes were even more important. When he returned, he would find someone to cut them into small pieces and plant them on a plot of land. After lying down for a long time, Ren Baqin could no longer open his eyes. In a daze, he felt the scene before him change. He was already in the room in the beast park. Squeaking sounds could be heard from outside the door. It was a pitiful sound. Ren Baqin changed his clothes and opened the door. The two pandas immediately hugged his legs and refused to let go. Furthermore, they were squeaking non-stop. What's wrong? Ren Baqin was at a loss at first. When he saw that the bamboo leaves in the basket were long gone and the floor was covered with feces, he immediately guessed that the two of them were hungry and thirsty. He had been gone for a day and no one cared about these two little ones. The bamboo leaves had long been eaten and no one fed them water. No wonder they were so pitiful. When he thought of this, Ren Baqin hurriedly went to a nearby place to fetch a bucket of water. Before he poured it into the basin, the two pandas leaned on the bucket and started to drink. The weather here was so hot and no one took care of them for a day. It seemed like the two little ones were thirsty. Rinpoche poured a basin of water and ran to the warehouse where the animal food was stored in the beast park. He took a big basket of bamboo leaves and came back. Seeing that the two little ones did not care about him and dived into the basket, Rinpoche stroked their heads. Fortunately, he had only been gone for a day. If he was gone for 3 days, it would be troublesome. It seemed like he had to find someone to take care of these two little ones. After a sleepless night, Rinpoche saw that the sky was still dark and estimated that it was around 2 in the morning. He returned to his room and stuffed everything under his bed. Then he lay on his bed and slept again. Early in the morning he was woken up by Caretaker Sher. Caretaker Sher's loud voice reverberated in Rinpoche's ears. "Where did you go yesterday? I have been looking for you for the whole day." "What's the matter?" Rinpoche struggled to open his eyes. He had a sleepy look on his face. "Her Majesty instructed me to clear a piece of land for you in the Beast Park. Also, I have gathered 70 taels of silver for rent. We have to go in a while. Otherwise, the 20 taels of silver will go down the drain." Caretaker Sher immediately lifted Rinpoche up from the bed. Rinpoche was 1.75 meters tall, but in Caretaker Sher's hands he looked like a child. This time Rinpoche immediately woke up. He helplessly said, "Wait for me, I will be done in a while." When Rinpoche was putting on his clothes, Caretaker Sher was still curious. "Why are you still wearing a loincloth on this day?" Rinpoche thought for a while before realizing that Caretaker Sher was talking about his underwear. He quickly pulled up his pants and looked at Caretaker Sher speechlessly. "You don't wear a loincloth? It's too hot. It's better to wear something cool," Caretaker Sher replied naturally. Rinpoche cupped his hands. He had nothing in common with Caretaker Sher. When he went out, it was already getting late. It was at least 7 or 8 in the morning. People in this world slept early and woke up early. They slept at 7 or 8 in the evening and woke up at 5 or 6 in the morning. He went to the kitchen to look for something to eat. When the cook saw Rinpoche, a smile appeared on his face. "Caretaker Rin, when are you going to teach me?" "In another 2 days. Rinpoche waved his hand. He did not have time for these 2 days. He took some dry rations made from an unknown variety of coarse grains and a bowl of vegetable soup. After finishing it, he returned to his room to take some money and followed Caretaker Sher to the rental shop. "I have bet all my assets and even borrowed some money," Caretaker Sher said painfully on the way. "Actually, I can pay for this shop myself," Rinpoche said. "Forget it. I have already taken advantage of you. I can't let you take on such a huge risk. Anyway, I can just throw in all the money earned from the other 2 shops. I reckon it won't make a loss." Rinpoche smiled. Caretaker Sher was indeed a good person. However, he was also a good person. That shop would definitely not make a loss in the future. Just as the two of them arrived, they heard someone say, "Little brother, you are here." He turned his head and saw the mustached middle-aged man from the other day. Rinpoche cupped his hands. "I have already given you the money. Naturally, I have to come." The middle-aged man smiled bitterly. "It seems that you have made up your mind. I shall take my leave now." Chapter 28. The two of them didn't have to wait long before the burly man arrived at the door. He nodded at the two of them and turned to open the door. Rinpoche passed the cloth bag he was carrying to that person. Inside the bag was the 130 taels of silver that he and Caretaker Sher had pooled together. It was indeed a little tiring to carry something that weighed more than 10 kilograms for almost an hour. After checking, the man nodded at the two of them and finally revealed a smile. Caretaker Sher took out the strips of paper and red clay that he had prepared beforehand. The man took a look at them and pressed his fingerprint on them. From now on, this shop would belong to Rinpoche and Caretaker Sher for a year. "How should I address you? Where can I find you if there's anything?" Rinpoche asked with a smile after seeing him press his fingerprint. "Zhendong General's residence. I have something to discuss with Caretaker Shi," the man said to Rinpoche and tossed the key over. After he left, Caretaker Sher said, "So it's the property of General Zhendong." Rinpoche had no idea about the court officials of Dayo. However, there was one thing he remembered. Those who could become generals were all capable of fighting. To be able to sit in the position of General of the East, one had to be able to fight. "What rank is the East vanquishing general?" Rinpoche asked curiously. Dayo's official ranks were modeled after Great Xia's, which was a 9-rank system. Primary grade 2. Caretaker Sher gestured with his fingers. "Brother Sher, what level are you at?" "9th class minor class." "Then, as a steward, I can't even be considered as a minor 9th rank steward." Dayo is the same as Great Xia. There are 9 ranks in the system and there are 18 ranks in total. Yours is called unattainable, Caretaker Shi explained. Ren Baqin smacked his lips. In the past he had never even been a class monitor. Now at least he had 10 subordinates. Moreover, he had so many good things in his hands. No matter what, he would be able to get an official position. Dayo respected martial arts. If he brought the ancient military books over, would he be able to fool a few people? What do you think? What should we do next? Caretaker Shi asked. Recruit people. Set up this place first. Brother Shi, don't you hate the people of the Yun Nation? In the future, the people of Dayo and the people of the Yun Nation will have one price. Let's do as you say. Caretaker Shi was elated when he heard this. Everything else is easy and it's easy to make. You can add more flavors and you can make any kind of fruit. Try not to leak the information about making ice with saltpeter, Ren Baqin warned. The matter of saltpeter could not be concealed, but the longer it could be concealed, the longer it could be used. Once the streets were filled with them, they wouldn't be able to make money anymore. Understood. This matter is definitely not bad. Caretaker Shi patted his chest and said. After the two of them walked around the room, Ren Baqin gave them some ideas. They would set up a bar counter in the corner, a row of benches at the side, and tables and chairs in the other empty spaces. This way people who came to buy shaved ice could sit here and eat, or they could sit down and rest for a while, waiting to take it away. There was nothing else. Brother Shi, we can also sell ice. A piece of shaved ice costs 5 copper coins, and a piece of ice the size of the one we use for storage can be sold for 30 copper coins. All right. The people of Yun Nation will double. After the two of them settled the matter, they left the shop and went straight to the Qin medicine shop that they saw last time. The shop wasn't considered big, but there were quite a lot of people. At the entrance they saw a few aborigines going in and out. Some of them were injured and some seemed to be sick. There was a middle-aged man sitting in the shop, and there were 3 to 4 helpers. Are you the boss? Ren Baqin stood at the side and asked after the man finished prescribing medicine. What's the matter? The man raised his head and took a glance at Ren Baqin. He then ignored him and shouted, Next. I have a business transaction to discuss with you. I only treat patients here, I don't do any other business. It's a business related to treating patients. Ren Baqin wasn't anxious at all. After the middle-aged man saw another 2 patients and saw that there was no one waiting behind him, he raised his head and said to Ren Baqin, What's the matter? Speak. I want to use my medicine prescription to exchange for your prescription. My prescription can save a large number of patients suffering from tetanus, which is also known as chichi. After hearing Ren Baqin's words, the middle-aged man's face became a lot more solemn. He said to the two of them, Come in with me, let's talk inside. There were 2 chairs and a table in the inner room. The middle-aged man first gestured to the two of them, then he sat on a chair. How do I address you? The middle-aged man asked casually. My surname is Ren. Ren Baqin, the person beside me is my companion. May I know how to address you? Ren Baqin asked. Up until now, he still didn't know Caretaker Shi's name and called him Brother Shi every day. My surname is Qin Zixing. Now tell me, what kind of prescription do you want to exchange for? Qin Zixing asked. The black mud cream. After Ren Baqin finished speaking, he stared at Qin Zixing attentively. As long as the other party was willing to exchange, Ren Baqin would definitely give him something that would satisfy him. He was just afraid that the other party wouldn't be willing to exchange. That would be troublesome. Qin Zixing muttered to himself for a while and said, The black mud cream is passed down from generation to generation in my Qin family. Although the production isn't high, its effects are amazing. However, medicine is used to treat people. It's not impossible to exchange with you, but the thing you are offering must have a corresponding value. Furthermore, it can't be the kind that is circulated everywhere. After hearing Qin Zixing's words, Ren Baqin was instantly elated. As long as you are willing to exchange, anything is fine. There were so many kinds of medicine in the modern world, including Chinese and Western medicine. There were also various medical treatments that exceeded Qin Zixing's imagination. There must be something that he was willing to exchange. In any case, Ren Baqin didn't feel any heartache for selling his father's farm. Tell me what I can offer. Penicillin can be used as an antibiotic to treat many diseases, including Chirin. When people fall sick, it is caused by bacterial invasion and inflammation. The main symptoms are redness, swelling, heat, pain, and dysfunction. The most obvious symptom is inflammation of the wound. Secondly, tonsillitis, sore throat, coughing, pneumonia, and bronchitis are all effective. The most important thing is to treat the wound as well as women giving birth. It can greatly reduce the chances of inflammation and Chirin. This medicine isn't difficult to produce, takes a short time to produce and can be widely used. Other than me, no one else knows about it. I think its value shouldn't be any lower than the black mud cream. After Rinpoche finished speaking, Qin Zixing first asked a few questions about the diseases that Rinpoche mentioned. After all, he didn't understand many of the terms that Rinpoche mentioned. However, after combining his many years of medical experience and asking Rinpoche about the parts that he didn't understand, he understood everything. There was no doubt that the medicine that Rinpoche mentioned was valuable. The effect of the black mud cream was indeed good, but its greatest value lay in the fact that the so-called Chirin would not appear during an extreme period. In his eyes, the length of the recovery process was secondary. After all, he was a doctor and not a businessman. The disadvantages of the black mud cream were also very obvious. The raw materials were scarce, the price was high, and it couldn't be widely used. A large number of patients who couldn't afford the black mud cream would either die or have their limbs amputated due to infection and Chirin. The medicine that Rinpoche mentioned was the most important point of the black mud cream. In Qin Zixing's eyes, it was easy to produce, the raw materials were cheap, and it could be widely used. Qin Zixing pondered for a long time and asked, "How difficult is it to produce this medicine?" "It's not difficult. I can teach you the entire set of cultivation, separation, and manufacturing methods of penicillin. If what you said is true, I can exchange the formula with you." Qin Zixing nodded his head. Chapter 29. Prepare some fruits first and put them in a place. After a period of time, when the fruits have rotted and become moldy, collect the layer of green mold on them. After that, I will tell you the extraction method, Rinpoche said. Sure. The penicillin you mentioned is the hair that grows after the fruits have rotted? Qin Zixing asked. Without waiting for Rinpoche's reply, he asked another question. The terminology you mentioned just now is different from what I know. I have never heard of it. Where did you learn it from? This is a medical technique from the distant West. We call it Western medicine, Rinpoche said. If you want to learn, I can show you 2 Western medicine books. Upon hearing this, Qin Zixing was overjoyed. He stood up from his chair and cupped his hands towards Rinpoche. Thank you, brother. Rinpoche waved his hand. He hesitated for a while and was about to tell Qin Zixing about another matter. Typhoid fever was a very troublesome disease in ancient times. It had the highest mortality rate. Even in modern times, many people died every year because they didn't receive treatment in time. In modern times, chloramphenicol was the main treatment for typhoid fever. However, it was difficult to produce because of the lack of resources. Rinpoche was prepared to exchange for penicillin and treatise on typhoid and miscellaneous diseases if he didn't have enough penicillin. However, now that penicillin could be exchanged for the formula for the black mud cream, there was no use for him to keep these 2 medical books. The Qin Medicine Hall had always had a good reputation. It treated commoners at a low price and had a high reputation in Lan City. Rinpoche was prepared to give these 2 books to Qin Zixing. It could be considered as doing a good deed for this world. Rinpoche thought to himself, I will bring these 2 medical books the next time I come here. What was more troublesome was that the language here was the same as Chinese, but the words were different. He probably had to read them to Qin Zixing. We will take our leave then. I will come back in 4 to 5 days after I have prepared the things. Rinpoche stood up and left. Qin Zixing sent the 2 of them to the door. You can treat typhoid fever? Caretaker Sure asked Rinpoche after he left. There is indeed a way to treat it. Rinpoche nodded. Caretaker Sure sighed. It would be great if you came 10 years earlier. Upon hearing this, Rinpoche knew that Qin Zixing's relatives and friends had passed away because of this disease. But how old was I 10 years ago? At that time, I didn't understand anything. Caretaker Sure squeezed out a smile. That's true. It's not too late to come. After that, Caretaker Sure lost interest in talking. After that, Rinpoche made a trip to the blacksmith shop where he made the box previously. He ordered a few fan blades and bearings to make an indigenous fan. He drew what he wanted on the map and gave it to the other party. The boss immediately said, This is simple. Come back to collect it in 2 days. After finishing his meal, he returned to the beast park and went to the ice house to take a look. Nominally, he was in charge of this ice cellar, but why did he not come here more than a few times? Fortunately, the odd job workers arranged by Caretaker Sure were very efficient, which saved him a lot of trouble. Now that the ice cellar was full, they were resting. Rinpoche waved his hand and said, Everyone put a piece of ice under your bed at night and have a good sleep. Anyway, as long as the ice cellar was full, it would be fine. If there were more, he might as well make the best use of it. Thank you very much, Caretaker Rin. The 10 of them chuckled. This was a good thing for them. After taking a stroll around the ice cellar, Rinpoche saw that they had nothing to do, so he called a few of them to follow him back to prepare seedlings for the sweet potatoes. When he returned, he saw 2 panda cubs lying in the shade. They looked so hot that they were unwilling to get up. Rinpoche fetched a basin of water, lifted the 2 little chaps and threw them into the basin. The 2 little chaps immediately crawled out of the basin while groaning. It seemed like they did not like soaking in the basin of water. After walking 1 round on the ground, they were covered in mud. When Rinpoche saw that the 2 little chaps wanted to rub against his body, he quickly took 2 steps away. Tian Tian and Gun Gun groaned as they crawled back to the shade and continued to stay there. Not long after, their fur was dry. This time, the 2 little chaps shook their heads and crawled back into the basin to wet their fur before coming out again. Rinpoche had to admit that these 2 little chaps were quite smart. Caretaker Rin, this flower bear's meat is not tasty. It's useless to keep it. The one who spoke was called Ting Dilong. He was very strong and honest. However, the moment he opened his mouth, he mentioned that the meat was not tasty. Rinpoche felt like giving him a kick. In your eyes, this panda has no other use other than being eaten, right? I'm keeping it for fun. Rinpoche casually said, in the future when I'm not in the beast park, look after these 2 chaps. Feed them some water and bamboo leaves. You all know where to get the bamboo leaves, right? Understood, Caretaker Ren, don't worry, the few of them replied. Rinpoche then pulled out the bag containing the sweet potatoes from under the bed. He guided them bit by bit. First, he cut the sweet potatoes into small pieces and hung them on a wooden stick. Then he filled a basin with water and placed the wooden stick on top of the basin. He ensured that half of the sweet potatoes were submerged in water and the other half was exposed. This way, after the sweet potatoes germinated, they could be used for planting. After he finished teaching them these things, someone from the palace came to call Rinpoche into the palace. This time it was Sherhu who came. He pulled Rinpoche aside and asked, I heard that you made a bet with the people from the imperial kitchen? You can say so. I mainly wanted to broaden their horizons, Rinpoche said happily. He turned around and pulled out the bag from under the bed. He took out a small bag of every kind of seasoning, wrapped them in cloth and carried them away. These are the things you prepared? Sherhu asked curiously as he looked at Rinpoche packing the small bags of seasoning. He had heard about the incident with the imperial kitchen. Logically speaking, the imperial kitchen had the best chefs in the country. What they said should be right. However, Rinpoche appeared out of thin air in the army that day and was able to make ice on such a hot day. Sherhu felt that Rinpoche was rather mysterious and felt that Rinpoche had a higher chance of winning. Now that he saw Rinpoche packing so many things, he knew that these were Rinpoche's preparations. When they arrived at the imperial kitchen and saw that Rinpoche had arrived, everyone stood up. Previously, when Rinpoche made the bet, everyone was present. These people had been waiting to teach Rinpoche a lesson for a few days. Finally, the day had arrived. Caretaker Rin, take out the seasoning that you mentioned. If you don't have it, don't blame me for breaking your legs and hanging them on the city wall. Caretaker Go had a fierce look on his face and spoke with a fierce tone. He really didn't believe that Rinpoche could take out a few seasonings that he had never seen before. One had to know that the spices that could be used were all in the imperial kitchen. Even if there were other spices, they would be unknown or in a faraway place. How could Rinpoche take out spices that he had never seen before in a few days? Caretaker Go didn't believe it at all. The others were also waiting to watch the show and teach this bastard who spoke nonsense a lesson. Hey, let me broaden your horizons. In the future, remember to stand at attention and call me brother when you see me. Rinpoche wasn't angry at all and said cheerfully. As he spoke, he opened the cloth bag. Inside there were small bags of things. See, this is star anise, this is cinnamon, this is monosodium glutamate, this is sesame, this is cumin, this is pepper, and this is 13 spices. You have never seen them before, right? Rinpoche said one by one. Seeing him take out such a pile of things, those people didn't look good. Immediately, someone said, who knows if those things are real or fake? Chapter 30. Caretaker Go slapped the chef's head, turned around, and squatted in front of Rinpoche with a cold face. He took out a little from each packet and put it in his mouth to taste. After tasting a few of them, his facial expression changed. As a chef, he felt that at least 2 of them could be used as spices. However, he still had to see how they were used and what kind of smell they would emit after being cooked. There were many things that had a smell, but not all of them could be used as spices. However, he was no longer so sure at this point in time. He stood up and looked at Rinpoche with a complicated gaze. He clenched his teeth for a long time before saying, "You cook, we will watch from the side. If these are really spices for cooking, I will call you brother when I see you in the future. In that case you guys have profited." When Rinpoche spoke, Caretaker Go and the rest's faces turned black. They wanted to scold him, but they suppressed their anger. They would settle the score after Rinpoche was done cooking. However, many of them looked at Rinpoche's relaxed expression and suspected that they would not have the chance to settle the score. The imperial kitchen was probably going to be wiped out this time. Rinpoche no longer paid attention to them. He walked 2 rounds in the imperial kitchen and remained silent. Finally, he found half a leg of a beast from the corner of the wall. He had seen this kind of meat in the kitchens of the beast park. It was the kind of animal that pulled carts on the streets, but it looked like an enlarged version of a goat. It had a strong odor, but it tasted very good. He felt that it was much more delicious than the mutton on earth. "Who can help me cut it into slices?" "1 plate is enough." Rinpoche turned his head and asked the crowd at the entrance. His knife skills could not be compared to these chefs, so he did not want to embarrass himself. "You go." Caretaker Go clenched his teeth, but still chose someone to help Rinpoche. Following which, Rinpoche took out another piece of meat, turned his head to look at the crowd, and revealed a smile that he thought was friendly. The meaning behind it was self-evident. The people in the imperial kitchen looked at him and were so angry that their teeth itched. This time, it was another person who walked towards Rinpoche with a kitchen knife. If this was on Earth, it would look like he was taking revenge on society. Rinpoche would definitely hide as far away as possible. However, the people of Dayo all looked like this, so Rinpoche did not care. Instead, he exhorted, "Cut it into small pieces, 1 layer of fat and 1 layer of lean meat with some skin." Seeing that the 2 people were cutting, Rinpoche found 2 cucumbers and washed them. He then slapped them on the chopping board twice before chopping them into pieces. "Yes, that's right, this is the cucumber with garlic sauce. It's a pity that there's no peeling. Later I'll fry some peanuts and mix them together." After the meat was cut and washed, Rinpoche marinated it with cumin, the spices of this world, and Sichuan peppercorns. He would prepare cumin lamb and braised it in braid. Rin lamb Rin prepared. Water. However, Chen said he and oh, why is this wok so heavy? Shin I and he I and of. Although adults could move it, it was impossible for them to flip the spoon with one hand. Of. Rinpoche put it aside. He estimated that it weighed at least 7 to 8 kilograms. Rinpoche turned his head and saw that the 2 men had gone back to stand and watch. He gestured with his hand and said, "I will tell you what to do and you 2 will do it." "They can't even stir-fry. How can they cook like this?" someone muttered. Rinpoche spread his hands helplessly. The frying ladles in this world were too heavy. He thought about the kitchen knife he took just now and realized that it wasn't light either. Was it their habit or something else? Or did the important things feel good to the touch? Rinpoche felt that it was highly possible that these chefs were burly and could fit 2 of him. The 2 chefs walked over reluctantly. Rinpoche instructed one of them to stir-fry the brown sugar and soy sauce until they were bubbling. Then he added some spices that resembled scallions and ginger. Finally, he stir-fried the meat. Rinpoche had to use one hand to pick up the wok, but the Dayo people handled it as if it was a piece of paper. This made Rinpoche realize the gap between him and the Dayo people. Other than the 2 chefs, the rest were watching from a distance. Although they didn't like Rinpoche, they focused their attention on him. This was because they had never done the process of stir-frying the sugar before. When the nutmeg, star anise and cinnamon were added, the aroma wafted out. The entire imperial kitchen could smell the aroma. The eyes of the surrounding chefs lit up when they smelled it. Apart from other ingredients, the aroma alone was too tempting and fragrant. The other ingredients were from their place, but they had never made such an aroma before. It could only be said that Rinpoche had indeed brought seasonings that could improve the quality of the dishes. Rinpoche instructed the other chef to stir-fry the cumin lamb while the other ingredients were simmered. Once the cumin was put in, a strong and fragrant cumin aroma wafted out. It was something that these chefs had never smelled before. This time, everyone couldn't stand still and crowded over. Rinpoche first scooped the cumin lamb into a small plate. He ate a piece, smiled and passed the plate to Caretaker Go. "Try it?" Caretaker Go took the plate with a sullen face. When it was slightly cold, he used 2 fingers to pick up a piece, put it in his mouth and carefully tasted it. He then passed the plate to the chefs behind him. Each of them quickly took a piece and put it in their mouth. Their eyes immediately lit up. The fishy smell of the meat was greatly reduced. It was even more tender and delicious, especially with the fragrance of the cumin. It was simply praiseworthy. After eating 1 piece, when they wanted to look for more, they realized that the plate was already empty. How is it? Rinpoche smiled. Caretaker Go clenched his teeth and stared at Rinpoche. Finally, he lowered his head and said, "Brother Ren. Not bad, not bad." Rinpoche clapped his hands and smiled. He then looked at the other chefs. "Brother Ren." Seeing that Caretaker Go had already called him, everyone could only open their mouths. Hearing the 7 or 8 burly men calling him Brother Ren, Rinpoche felt at ease and said, "All right, just remember to call me brother when you see me in the future. Calling me Brother Ren sounds weird." The chefs at the scene all felt sullen. However, who asked them to lose the bet? Since Caretaker Go had already called him, how could they not? Who would have thought that this guy from the Beast Park would actually take out so many seasonings that they had never seen before? When the red braised meat was ready, Rinpoche divided it into 2 portions, 1 large and 1 small. He first tasted it before passing it to Caretaker Go. After eating this fragrant, soft and melt-in-your-mouth red braised meat, everyone's sullen feelings were thrown to the side. They only wanted to know what these seasonings were. Where exactly did he get them from? Chapter 31. Rinpoche covered the cumin lamb in red braised meat with a lid and asked them to fry some peanuts. This time, without Caretaker Go's instructions, someone took the initiative to do it. Now, everyone wanted to know from Rinpoche what these spices were all about. Regarding this question, Rinpoche did not hide it. After all, it was just some spices. It was fine as long as he could show off in the imperial kitchen. "This is cumin. All of you have tried it just now. It can remove the fishy smell and increase the tenderness of the meat. Another very important function is that it has a little preservative effect. After all, the weather is so hot and a dish won't be kept for long after it is cooked. Cumin can slow down the deterioration of the taste of the dish." Even though some of the terms were different, everyone could easily understand what Rinpoche said. "Where can I buy this cumin?" someone immediately asked. The others looked over expectantly. However, they did not know if Rinpoche would tell them. After all, they had never seen this before. It was considered a unique item and its value could be imagined. "Wait for me to plant some and see how the output is." Rinpoche thought for a while and said, "Can you sell it to us?" "Of course." Rinpoche spread his hands. "What else can I do if I don't sell it? I don't intend to be a chef." Previously, Rinpoche mentioned spices that they had never heard of. Their impression of Rinpoche was that he was full of nonsense. In addition, he did not look like a Dayo citizen, so they were extremely disgusted with him. When Rinpoche really took out the spices, their attitude began to change. When Rinpoche agreed to sell them the spices, their eyes were already burning with eagerness. After all, the attitude of other people towards Dayo was barbaric and irritable. However, they had to admit that they were all straightforward people. They would say one thing and say another. Rinpoche ignored them and continued, "This is star anise, nutmeg, cinnamon, pepper." He explained all the spices to them. After listening to him, everyone in the imperial kitchen almost worshipped Rinpoche. Not to mention calling him brother, they could even call him uncle. The spices that Rinpoche took out were an eye-opener for them. With these spices, they were confident that they could make more dishes. Furthermore, the taste was more than 1 grade higher than before. After Rinpoche explained it to them, it was much easier to instruct them to work. He crushed the fried peanuts, chopped the spicy green fruits and tossed them in. Then he put the cucumbers in and mixed them with salt, brown sugar, monosodium glutamate and minced garlic. Everyone tasted it and asked him what the white granules were that weren't explained. Rinpoche shook his head and said, I'm afraid this thing can't be produced in a short period of time." Hearing him say that, although everyone felt a little regretful, they had already gained a lot. One had to know that the imperial kitchen only had soy sauce, vinegar, brown sugar, salt, and a few vegetables similar to onions, ginger, garlic and chili. This time around, Rinpoche had taken out 6 or 7 of them, which made them feel as if they had opened the door to a whole new world. "Send the dishes to Her Majesty," Rinpoche said to Caretaker Go. Caretaker Go cupped his fists at Rinpoche and said, "Whatever you say in the imperial kitchen from now on." Then he got someone to put together a fruit and send it to Her Majesty. Rinpoche walked around and saw that there were still ice cubes in the corner. He said to the rest of the imperial kitchen staff, "Find a box and put the ice cubes in it. Then put the vegetables, fruits and meat in it. It can be stored for a longer period of time. The hotter the weather, the faster the food will go bad. The lower the temperature, the longer it can be stored." Now, everyone was just short of worshipping Rinpoche like a god. After hearing what he said, they immediately nodded their heads and prepared to find someone to make a box and follow Rinpoche's instructions. Caretaker Go and the rest sent the dishes into the palace. Just as they opened the lid, they could smell the aroma of the red braised pork from afar. The two maids beside the Empress secretly swallowed their saliva. "I have never seen this dish before," the Empress took a glance and said casually. "It's made by Caretaker Ren. I have never seen this dish before, but the taste is indeed not bad," Caretaker Go said in full detail. "I remember now. You guys even made a bet, right? Last time you said it was that fellow with the surname Ren. This time it's Caretaker Ren. Did he win?" The Empress sat up slightly and said, "Indeed he won. He took out a few spices that I have never seen before. Your Majesty will know after you taste it," Caretaker Go said. The Empress nodded her head slightly. When the poison was served to her, the first thing she tasted was the red braised pork. The aroma of this dish was the strongest and it made her feel a little hungry. Originally, it looked a little greasy, but after eating a mouthful of the red braised pork, it didn't feel greasy at all. It was fragrant and glutinous. Especially, the flavors brought about by the few spices that she had never tasted before made the Empress nod her head. "Very good. What is this called?" "Red braised pork," Caretaker Go said. "The name doesn't sound good, but it's indeed not bad." Following which she ate the lamb with cumin. Even though it didn't look much different from what she usually ate, with the addition of cumin, the lamb became even more tender. The fishy smell was also reduced by half. Coupled with the fragrance of cumin, the Empress was similarly full of praise. Today the Empress ate a lot more. Even though her every move was still elegant, her speed was much faster. When the dishes were finally served, Caretaker Go looked at the amount of food on the plate and knew that the Empress had eaten half more than usual. This was extremely rare. It could be seen that Her Majesty really liked these new dishes. "Very good, very good. Do this again tomorrow. In addition, you can look for him to learn a few more new dishes." The Empress stood up and said as she walked a few steps on the ground. "Yes, Your Majesty. Aren't you going to arrange for Caretaker Ren to work in the imperial kitchen?" Caretaker Go asked. Even though he hated Rinpoche's attitude at the start, when Rinpoche took out the real stuff, he also approved of Rinpoche. Furthermore, not only was Rinpoche familiar with all kinds of spices, he was also proficient in many new dishes that he had never seen before. It would be a pity to continue to work in the Beast Park. Regardless of whether Rinpoche was to be the head chef or the assistant chef in the imperial kitchen, Caretaker Go had no opinion. "Forget about him, I have my own arrangements. Go back and ask him to tell me about that romance of the Three Kingdoms. Qing Yuan, follow him and bring him here." "Yes, Your Majesty," a tall and good-looking female attendant who was about 20 years old answered softly. After leaving the palace hall, the female attendant opened the lid of the dish and secretly tasted a piece. Her eyes immediately lit up. Just now when she smelled it, she felt that it was very similar. Only after tasting it did she know how delicious it was. "Oh, it's indeed delicious." After satisfying her curiosity, Qing Yuan sucked the grease off her fingers. She placed both her hands behind her back and rolled her eyes. "Brother Rin, Her Majesty asked you to tell him about Romance of the Three Kingdoms," Caretaker Go said to Rinpoche when he entered the courtyard of the imperial kitchen and saw him sitting there in a daze. Chapter 32. Rinpoche followed Qing Yuan into the palace. The Empress was still reclining on the couch. It seemed that she would do this every time he saw her. She liked to recline. In other words, Rinpoche suddenly noticed a problem. The couch was very wide. A normal person sitting on it wouldn't be able to lean against the back. Furthermore, it would be very far away. It would definitely be uncomfortable to sit like this. This discovery made Rinpoche think of something. However, he quickly withdrew his thoughts and continued to narrate Romance of the Three Kingdoms, not far away from the Empress. After narrating for 2 rounds, the sky was already dark. The Empress then asked him to stop. "You disappear every 3 days. What are you doing?" The Empress asked lazily while squinting her phoenix eyes. Rinpoche's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. Beads of perspiration rolled down his back and forehead. Although he knew that this day would come, he still wanted to hide it for a period of time. This was because he couldn't explain his disappearance every 3 days. When he was discovered, the higher his status, the more secure his safety would be. Previously, when he found out that the people of Dayo were all boorish and straightforward people, he was more or less relieved. He thought that perhaps he wouldn't be discovered so quickly. When he was in prison, no one should have discovered him. He didn't expect to be discovered after leaving twice. Although the Empress had a lazy look on her face, Rinpoche suspected that he would be beheaded if he didn't answer well. Both of you can leave. The Empress waved her hand at the maids beside her. Following which, the hall fell into silence. The Empress lay on the couch with one hand supporting her head and waited for Rinpoche's answer. Rinpoche's forehead was dripping with sweat. He kept asking himself, what should I do? Should I tell the truth or tell a big lie? How can I make the person in front of me believe me without giving myself away? Rinpoche hesitated for a long time and was prepared to tell a big lie. If he couldn't hide it, he would tell the truth. Your Majesty, forget it. I don't want to listen to lies. I know you have secrets. Everyone has secrets. When you appeared, it was very unexpected. Naturally, you have more secrets than others. It doesn't matter if your background is unknown. I don't care where China is. However, you have to show your value. As long as you have the ability, I can use you. I can give you whatever you want. Go down. Just as Rinpoche was about to open his mouth, the Empress suddenly spoke. Rinpoche didn't know whether he should be happy or sad about the content of her words. He was happy that after hearing the Empress's words, she would no longer pursue the matter of his origins and his disappearance every 3 days. In the future he could be at ease. Even if he suddenly disappeared, the Empress wouldn't say anything as long as he displayed his ability and value. He didn't have to rack his brains to figure out how to hide his whereabouts anymore. The sad thing was, who said that the brains of the people of Dayo were all muscles? The Empress seemed to have seen through him. She could even detect that he was lying. This made Rinpoche feel a little terrified. It was like playing a game, and suddenly the natives in the game pointed out that you were not from this world. It was a frightening feeling. When he returned to the Beast Park, he felt much better after being blown by the night breeze. In any case, it was a good thing that the Empress didn't pursue the matter. However, he had to be more attentive in the future. Just as he returned to his room, Tian Tian and Gun Gun hugged his legs and whimpered, refusing to let go. Rinpoche squatted down and stroked the 2 little chaps. Even though his heart was still palpitating, he had mostly calmed down. He first filled a basin of water for the 2 little chaps and fetched some bamboo leaves. The 2 little chaps sat in the bamboo leaves and grabbed the bamboo leaves on the ground to eat. Only Rinpoche returned to his room to rest. After thinking about the Empress's words over and over again, he fell into a deep sleep. The next day he woke up and looked at the sweet potatoes. They had already been processed and were waiting to germinate. Rinpoche first looked for caretaker Shi and brought him to look at the land for planting sweet potatoes. Near the Beast Park, there was a piece of flat land that had been cultivated. There were some fruits and vegetables planted on it. Most of the food that the odd job workers in the Beast Park ate was grown here. Usually, there were some elderly people and women who were the family members of the odd job workers here to take care of the land. What do you think of this place? The vegetables are also ripe. I will get someone to pluck them now, caretaker Shi said as he led him to a piece of land. Let's walk around a bit more. It doesn't have to be so big for now. 1 mu is enough, Rinpoche said. After walking half around, he saw a small piece of land at an oblique corner. It was about 1 mu in size. The location was a little remote and the land wasn't the best. However, Rinpoche didn't mind. Anyway, the requirements for planting sweet potatoes weren't high. It was better to plant them in a more remote location. Let's do it here. The land here is ordinary. The harvest will be slightly worse, caretaker Shi advised. It's all right, this is fine. Rinpoche smiled. The location of this land was rather remote. However, it was just right. No one would notice what he planted. Can these 2 pieces be used? Thinking of the spices that he brought back, he pointed to the land not far away and asked. Caretaker Shi looked in the direction that Rinpoche was pointing at. He patted his chest and said, no problem. Even though the Beast Park doesn't have a lot of land, a few pieces of land can still be allocated. After confirming the location, caretaker Shi hurriedly left to settle the matter of the shaved ice shop. The other 2 shops had also been purchased. Now all 3 shops had to be cleaned up. They also had to find a carpenter to make a bar counter and a bench. Rinpoche had already taught caretaker Shi the method of making ice. It was very simple. All he had to do was to know where to find saltpeter. As for making fruit shaved ice, it was even simpler. Ren Baqin didn't need to participate in the subsequent matters. He just needed to split the profits. After choosing the land, the sweet potatoes hadn't germinated yet. Ren Baqin had nothing to do, so he went to look for the odd job worker who knew how to do carpentry. He asked him to make a weird-looking chair according to his requirements. Ren Baqin wanted to make a sofa. He thought of it when he saw the Empress's couch. A sofa that could sink one's entire body into would definitely be more comfortable than a couch. Naturally, he would make a sofa for the Empress first. Then he would make one for himself. Soon after, he began to look for fillers for the sofa in the Beast Park. Anything like cotton or bird feathers would do. Even though cotton wasn't available in Dayo, there were plenty of bird feathers in the Beast Park. Every day, a lot of them were cleared out and all of them were burned as rubbish. After getting someone to keep it for him, Ren Baqin realized that the people of Dayo actually didn't know how to tan leather. Leather was taken from animals and dried in the sun. Then, it was sold in bundles to those leather merchants. Naturally, the price was so low that it made one's hair stand on end. If one wanted to buy tan leather from the merchants, the price would make one flinch. An ordinary sheepskin, the kind that belonged to a giant sheepskin that pulled a cart, could only be sold for 1 tael of silver. However, tan sheepskin could be sold for 10 taels of silver each. Just thinking about the profits involved made one go crazy. It was no wonder that foreign merchants flocked to Dayo. Even if it was so hot here that they could die, there was nothing to enjoy. Profits that were several times or even more than 10 times, could make most people take the risk out of desperation. Chapter 33. When he woke up again, he looked around the unfamiliar room. He shook his head with all his might and finally became a little more clear-headed. Yesterday afternoon, he went to the palace to recite Romance of the Three Kingdoms to the Empress. At night, he was dragged along by caretaker Shur and a few other caretakers to drink until midnight. The alcohol content in that world was not high, but it was very strong. After drinking too much, my head hurts like hell. He went to the bathroom to wash his face and looked at himself in the mirror. During this period of time, he had become much darker and more muscular. It couldn't be helped. In that world, they ate meat for almost every meal, and there were fewer things like noodles and vegetables. After a period of time, it was easier for people to gain weight. Turning on his phone, there were 3 missed calls. 2 of them were from Qin Qin and the last one was from someone that surprised him. It was Dong Haiqing, whom he had exchanged phone numbers with the other day. I don't know why she called. Ren Baqin thought about it. She seemed to have said that she wanted to get together with her local classmates. It should be about this. He didn't plan to return the call. Instead, he went online to search for the methods of tanning furs and skins. From several tanning methods, he chose 2. One was the alum tanning method and the other was the tanning method. He needed alum and mirabolite respectively. Both of them could be found in that world. After all, he couldn't bring the materials back by himself every time. After daybreak, he went out for breakfast and drove to buy alum and mirabolite. Then he went to a few iron and welding shops to find someone to make a homemade fan. This was something that Ren Baqin had just thought of. After all, people in modern society knew a lot about fans, so it was easy to make them. He could take the finished product back and find someone to copy it. He went to a few shops and offered 3,000 yuan. Finally, someone accepted the job and could collect it the next day. Furthermore, the other party's words reminded him of something else, the air cooler. This was also very easy to make. They just needed to put a box outside the fan and put a curtain in front of it to guide the water. As for the water circulation system, there was no need to consider it. When the time came, it would be easier to put a water tank on top and pour water in. He bought some food and went home. Every time he woke up, it was already the 10th day. The food in the fridge had to be changed every time. After a few times, most of the food in the fridge was sausages which were not easy to spoil. Just as he reached home, his phone rang. Ren Baqin saw an unfamiliar name on the screen. It was Dong Haiqing. After some thought, he answered the phone on the 5th ring. Ren Baqin? 8,000 years old? Dong Haiqing's voice came from the other end of the line. When Ren Baqin heard this nickname that he hadn't heard for a long time, he felt slightly embarrassed. Ever since he was young, he had only had this nickname. Regardless of the new environment, it wouldn't take long for this nickname to be called again. It had to be said that in certain aspects, people's thoughts were similar. Dong Haiqing didn't mention it the last time they met, so he thought she had forgotten about it. He didn't expect it to be brought up this time. It's me. It's really not easy to find you. Dong Haiqing laughed heartily on the other end of the phone. I just came back from out of town. Oh? Are you going to the class reunion tonight? You're the only one left in the city? Dong Haiqing asked. Who are they? After Ren Baqin finished asking, Dong Haiqing mentioned 6 names, including Qin Bing, who was mentioned the other day. He didn't know anyone, or rather he didn't know anyone in school. Even if they were roommates, they only nodded at each other. What? Do we have to see if there's a girl of our dreams at a class reunion? Is it so difficult to invite Baqiansui now? Dong Haiqing said. Alright, I'll go, Ren Baqin said helplessly. That's settled then. I'll send you the address at 6 p.m. Dong Haiqing hung up the phone. Ren Baqin turned on the television and stared blankly for a while. Then he went online to search for information. After all, he couldn't go online every time he discovered a problem. Although it was fortunate to be able to travel between the 2 worlds. However, Ren Baqin couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to travel to another world after he returned. It would be fine if he stayed on Earth, but if he stayed in that world, it would be better to memorize the knowledge. In the afternoon, Ren Baqin calculated that it was about time. After taking a shower, he found a t-shirt and went out. The restaurant for the class reunion wasn't considered big. After all, they had just graduated and didn't have much money. But from the outside, the restaurant looked quite exquisite. Dong Haiqing and another pretty girl were standing at the entrance. Seeing Ren Baqin's Audi A6L, Dong Haiqing's eyes lit up. You're here. I've created an opportunity for both of you. You must grasp it. I really didn't realize that Ren Baqin had such a strong foundation. The other girl was naturally Qin Bing. When she was in school, there was a period of time when she was attracted to Ren Baqin. She even had the thought of pursuing him. In the end, after Dong Haiqing found out, she said, Ren Baqin doesn't have the looks, doesn't have the family background, and doesn't have the ability. She thought about it for a long time, but in the end, nothing came of it. Back then, the unripe fruit in his heart had quietly rotted away and fallen to an unknown place. During this class reunion, Dong Haiqing suddenly told her to grasp the opportunity to see if she could get together with Ren Baqin. She also said that she found out that Ren Baqin was actually a rich second-generation heir. This made her feel an indescribable feeling in her heart. She felt a little bitter and wanted to cry. Hey Ren Baqin, you're finally here. If I don't invite you today, I won't be able to explain myself. Dong Haiqing shouted at Ren Baqin, who had just gotten out of the car. Ren Baqin waved his hand. When he entered the restaurant, he saw Dong Haiqing and Qin Bing standing there. Long time no see. You seem to be doing well. Qin Bing sorted out her emotions and greeted Ren Baqin. Ren Baqin didn't know what to say. A month ago, he was still earning a salary of 3,000 to 4,000 yuan and living in a cramped room. A year's salary was only enough to keep himself warm. But now, he had become someone who made a name for himself in the eyes of others. For a moment, he couldn't adapt to this change. Let's go. Everyone has gone in. You're the only one left, Dong Haiqing said to him. When they entered the private room, there were already 5 people sitting inside, 3 guys and 2 girls. When they saw Ren Baqin, they were stunned. Then one of them asked, Ren Baqin? You're Lu Zidong, right? I haven't seen you for a year and you've put on so much weight. Ren Baqin smiled and extended his hand to shake hands. The person in front of him had a square face and looked to be at least 180 kilograms. Ren Baqin remembered that when he was in school, he was only 120 kilograms. He didn't expect him to put on so much weight in just a year. I'm Su Li. We've been classmates for 4 years, but Ren Baqin doesn't even remember me. This is really embarrassing. Su Li mocked himself. The others also laughed. This time it was Ren Baqin's turn to be embarrassed. He had just graduated for a year, but he actually recognized the wrong classmates. The other 4 people were Guo Kai, who wore very small spectacles, Qi Kai, who had a clean appearance and neatly combed hair, and the other 2 girls, Zhang Xiaotong and Miao Feifei. Their looks were considered average. Chapter 34. Everyone sat down and chatted while waiting for the dishes to be served. They reminisced about their school days and were rather harmonious. There were no pretentious scenes like in novels. After all, they had just graduated and the gap between them wasn't huge. Su Li had opened a seafood shop with the help of his family and it was doing well. The rest of them were working. When the dishes were served and everyone filled their cups, Dong Haiqing raised her glass and said, We have been classmates for 4 years and now we are gathered here again after graduating. We are all fated. We should interact more in the future so that we won't drift apart. After finishing her sentence, she downed her glass immediately. Seeing that she was so straightforward, everyone felt embarrassed to hide it and drank it all in one gulp. After drinking a glass of wine, everyone became much more friendly. Ren Baqin listened at the side and rarely interrupted. He didn't participate much in school matters and had nothing to say. Dong Haiqing and Zhang Bing asked him about it from time to time and tried to lead him into their conversation. Unfortunately, Ren Baqin had nothing to say and would stop after 1 or 2 sentences. After 3 rounds of drinking, Guo Kai, who had the lowest tolerance for alcohol, started to talk about his company's prospects and how he was valued by the leaders. Su Li, Guo Kai, Miao Feifei and the rest responded from time to time, which made Guo Kai even more enthusiastic. The other Guo Xiaotong was already covering her head with her hands and basically didn't say a word. It seemed like she didn't usually drink, but she drank a lot today. Ren Baqin could tell that Guo Kai's gaze was always on Qin Bing, who was beside him. Dong Haiqing was too gorgeous and Guo Kai felt that he couldn't match up to her. Qin Bing wasn't bad-looking either. She gave off an innocent vibe and was the type that many men liked. Even though her legs were a flaw, a long dress could completely cover it up and she would be very eye-catching when she walked on the streets. Therefore it was normal for Guo Kai to be interested in her. In the animal kingdom, birds had to display their beautiful feathers in order to woo their mates. Animals had to show their claws and teeth and compete with other males. Humans did the same. Whether it was appearance, height, temperament, character, skills, future, or money, they were no different from birds displaying their feathers. It was just that some people cared more about appearance, some cared more about character, some cared more about potential, and some directly expressed that they only cared about money. As Ren Baqin was thinking about this, he felt a little bored as he watched the few of them chatting animatedly. While Guo Kai was displaying his feathers, Qin Bing's attention was never on him. From time to time she would turn her head and tell him about the interesting things that happened during her work. Ren Baqin, on the other hand, was focused on listening to her. The way the two of them whispered to each other, in Guo Kai's opinion, made Guo Kai somewhat unable to restrain himself. He originally thought that he would have a chance to meet his old classmates here, but the other party seemed to be more interested in Ren Baqin, which made him somewhat indignant. What did the other party have more than him? Wasn't he just a little better looking? In society it was more important to look at ability, connections and to put it bluntly, money. Even though he didn't have one now, Guo Kai reckoned that his future was much better than Ren Baqin's. Yes, even though Ren Baqin didn't have the face of a celebrity, he was still considered delicate and pretty. It was easy for people to have a good impression of him. Although he wasn't as strong as him, he was more than enough to surpass him. Once again when Qin Bing whispered to Ren Baqin, Guo Kai couldn't help but ask, "Baqiansui, what have you been up to recently?" Ren Baqin tilted his head. He seemed to have asked this question just now. Seeing that the other party was still looking at him, he replied, "I haven't done anything. I'm just squatting at home and living off the leftovers." "Oh, I see." Guo Kai nodded his head and didn't say anything else. After all, he had already entered society and wasn't a fool. He wouldn't say things that were too overboard. All he wanted was for Ren Baqin to say it once more. Ren Baqin also smiled. He knew what the other party was thinking. However, looking at Guo Kai's flushed face, he knew that he had drunk too much. Dong Haiqing looked at Guo Kai, then looked at Ren Baqin. She didn't tell him that Ren Baqin was a second-generation nouveau riche and that he could earn as much as others who had to work their whole lives just by sitting at home. After all, he was a second-generation nouveau riche and they were classmates. This was a scarce resource. She told Qin Bing because Qin Bing wasn't scheming and was easier to manipulate. If Qin Bing and Ren Baqin got together, she would also gain a lot of benefits. As for the others, there was no need for her to tell them. It would be best if the others treated Ren Baqin as an ordinary student who didn't have a sense of presence in school. The few of them drank some more. After Guo Kai had overdosed, he drank cup after cup. He sat there swaying. Dong Haiqing said, "I think everyone has drunk enough. We still have to work tomorrow. Let's call it a day. Let's meet another day. Let's exchange contact details and keep in touch in the future. Since everyone has just started work, let's go Dutch. Let's see how much it costs later. Don't mind, going Dutch is looking down on us guys. Today's meal is on me," Suli said. "Forget it, I'm happy to see my old classmate today. I'll pay for it. I'll fight with whoever tries to snatch it from me," Guo Kai said as he pulled Suli aside. He stood up and rushed to pay the bill. In any case, Ren Baqin didn't care how he was going to pay. He could go Dutch or treat himself. However, since Guo Kai insisted on paying the bill, he simply sat on the stool and didn't move. In the eyes of others, he was just sitting there and waiting for the result. He had no intention of paying at all. After Guo Kai and Su Li left, Ren Baqin looked at the rest of them. Zhang Xiaotong was the only one who needed someone to take care of her. The rest didn't have much of a problem. Hence, Renbachin followed them out. What's the matter? Why are you gesticulating with me? Just as they reached the hall, they heard Guokai's drunken voice. Guokai and Su Li were standing in front of the bar counter. The person they were talking to was a girl behind the counter. She was gesticulating with her hands anxiously. Is this sign language? Renbachin took a glance. The cashier of the restaurant was a disabled person? This was really strange. He didn't have any opinion on it. Disabled people also needed to work. It was just that it was rare to see them in places like restaurants, especially when they were cashiers. I told you to pay the bill several times. Why are you pretending not to hear me? Then you gesticulated with me. Are you pretending to be mute? Guokai had drunk quite a lot of alcohol just now. At this moment, his face was flushed. He slapped the counter and shouted at the top of his lungs. His voice was drunk and somewhat unclear. However, his words still attracted the attention of many customers. I'm sorry, sir. And Fei has a hearing impairment. Her hearing aid isn't working today, so she can't hear what you are saying. A waiter in his 20s hurriedly came over to explain when he heard the commotion. The girl named Fei also quickly wrote the words, I'm sorry, on a piece of paper. Then she raised it with her hand. All right. Su Li tried to smooth things over with Guokai. Guokai pushed Su Li away and said, Yo, this is the first time I've met a mute person who can't hear at the bar counter. Your restaurant is really creative. Chapter 35. Guokai wasn't in a good mood today and had drunk a lot. Under the influence of alcohol, even after listening to the waiter's explanation, he still said a few unpleasant words. The girl called Fei looked at him with tears in her eyes. Although she couldn't hear him clearly, she could read his lips. Therefore she could still understand those two sentences. I am not a mute. And Fei said word by word. It seemed that she rarely spoke. Her voice was dry and unclear. You might as well not have said anything at all. Guokai looked drunk. Many regular customers knew that this girl at the front desk had hearing problems. She usually wore a red hearing aid on her ear. They were very sympathetic towards this girl. Therefore, when they heard Guokai's voice, many people looked over angrily. Renbachin couldn't stand it anymore. He pulled Guokai away and said to the girl called Fei, Sorry, he drank too much. Renbachin, what do you mean? I'm just asking. What's wrong? Did I get in your way? Are you trying to be a hero and save the damsel in distress? Guokai staggered. When he realized that it was Renbachin who was pulling him, he became even angrier. Su Li, get him out of here. Renbachin was disgusted by him. He pushed Guokai away and said to Su Li. When Dong Haiqing and Chen Bing saw the situation, they quickly pulled Guokai out to get some fresh air. Only then did they manage to get him out. Hey, don't pull me. Let go of me. Let me talk to him. What's wrong with you, Renbachin? Are you going to be awesome after graduation? Did I get in your way? Why are you pulling me? Renbachin ignored him and turned to look at the girl called Fei. She was wiping her tears at the bar counter. Her eyes were red. I'm really sorry. He drank too much. Ignore him. Renbachin said. Then he realized that the other party might not be able to hear him. He grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, Sorry, he drank too much. Then he showed it to the girl. The girl's eyes were red as she wrote, It's okay, thank you. Renbachin smiled at her and asked the waiter, How much is it? 632 yuan. The waiter looked at the bill on the bar counter and said. Renbachin paid the bill and wrote on the paper, Don't care about what other people say. In this world, there are people full of malice and there are also people with good intentions. You've already done very well. Even though Fei's eyes were filled with tears when she saw what he wrote, she still smiled at him. Write thank you on the paper. Looking at the girl's clean smile, Renbachin felt a soft spot in his heart being touched. Renbachin waved his hand and left. When he walked out, he heard the waiter say, Scum. Needless to say, he was talking about Guokai. He went out and saw a few people outside. Guokai was sitting on the steps and vomiting all over the ground. He was in a daze. When the wind blows, I vomit. Chen Bing turned around and said to Renbachin. Who knows where he lives? Call a taxi and send him back. I know the general location, Chikai said. Feifei, can you send Zhang Xiaotong back? Dong Haiqing asked Miao Feifei. Su Li followed Miao Feifei and Zhang Xiaotong's car and left with them. Only Dong Haiqing, Zhang Bing and Renbachin were left. Seeing the two taxis leave, Dong Haiqing turned around and said, I didn't know that you could drink so much. I'm still alright. Ren Baqin smiled. His alcohol tolerance was completely trained by Qin Qing. Guokai usually seems to be fine, but today he drank too much and went crazy. I know. Oh yes, have you contacted your friend, Qin Qing, recently? Dong Haiqing asked. I just came back and came here after receiving your call. I haven't contacted him, Ren Baqin replied. Even if he had contacted her, he couldn't tell her. Only God knew what happened between her and Qin Qing. Furthermore, Qin Qing had always been a walking cannon. He changed girls every day. Ren Baqin didn't want to get involved in this matter. Alright, I'll make a move first. Bing Bing's place is a little far. Send her off. Leave the car here or find a designated driver. Don't drink and drive. Dong Haiqing gave Qin Bing a hug and waved at Ren Baqin. Even though she was a little scheming, interacting with Dong Haiqing made him feel comfortable. Understood. Goodbye. In the end, only Ren Baqin and Qin Bing were left. Ren Baqin first made a phone call and arranged for a designated driver. After which, he was told that the driver would arrive in half an hour. Wait for a while, Ren Baqin turned and said to Qin Bing. Qin Bing tucked her hair behind her ears and looked at Ren Baqin. You have changed a lot. Really? Ren Baqin touched his face. I haven't seen you for only a year. There shouldn't be much change. Your appearance hasn't changed much, but your entire personality has changed. Qin Bing carefully looked at Ren Baqin's eyes and said, In the past, if I looked at you like this, I wouldn't know where your eyes would be looking. Ren Baqin touched his nose. In the past, he was indeed like this. He didn't like to look at others and would subconsciously look away. In the past, I didn't realize that you were so manly. Qin Bing pursed her lips and smiled. It's a little unexpected. Why do you say that? Just now, when you pulled Guokai away and asked Su Kai to get him out, I didn't expect you to take the initiative to interfere in certain matters. From what I remember, you never took the initiative to participate in anything. Now, my impression of you has changed greatly. You are a man who can be relied on at crucial moments. After Qin Bing finished speaking, she remained silent for a while. She then raised her head and said, If you were so reliable in school, I might have really pursued you. Ren Baqin lowered his head and met Qin Bing's clear and bright eyes. He subconsciously looked away and said, It seems that the impression I gave others in the past was really unreliable. Qin Bing saw that he had shifted his gaze away and looked into the distance nonchalantly. That's right. Think about it, how can a person who is always silent, doesn't participate in anything and never expresses himself be reliable? Ren Baqin thought for a while and had to admit that what Qin Bing said was right. He had always been like that. It seemed that only in that world would he take the initiative to do something. The main reason was that he could see returns for everything he did. Furthermore, he was unique. What he had was something that no one else had. Perhaps it was because of this that he would want to express himself and take the initiative to do something. The two of them chatted idly. After waiting for half an hour, the designated driver finally arrived. After sending Qin Bing to her neighborhood, Ren Baqin then returned to his own place. Lying on the bed, Ren Baqin thought about tonight's class gathering. He really didn't have any thoughts about Qin Bing now. Then, he thought about what he was going to do when he returned to the other world. Should he look for a chef to learn how to cook? Although he could cook a few dishes, they didn't look that good. At most, it would be a fresh experience for others. Chapter 36. After staying at home for 2 days, the next time he woke up, he was awakened by the heat. Just by feeling the stuffy heat in the room, he knew where he was. Looking at the sky outside, the sun had just risen. It was probably around 4 in the morning. He should sleep for a while more. However, it didn't take long for him to break out in a sweat after lying on the bed. He began to miss the air-conditioned room. He held the finished fan in his hand, and there was a rope at the bottom. He pulled the fan and it started to spin. When the rope reached its end, it automatically retracted, and the fan continued to spin in the opposite direction. Although the spinning time was not long, the wind was much stronger than the fan. After playing with the fan for a while, he still felt hot, so he changed his clothes and went out for a walk. He planned to go to the ice house and bring back a block of ice. As soon as he pushed the door open, he saw 2 black and white guys sleeping soundly on the stone slab by the door. Ren Baqin poked them twice with his finger, and one of them hugged his hand so that he wouldn't do anything funny. Then they went back to sleep. Ren Baqin carefully withdrew his hand and went straight to the ice house to get a piece of ice. He placed it at the head of the bed and finally felt a little more comfortable. He went back to sleep. When he woke up, it was already 7 or 8 o'clock. First, she looked at the sweet potatoes in the room. The parts that were exposed to the water had already sprouted. In a few days they could be planted in the ground. He first went to the kitchen to get a bowl of porridge to drink, then dragged 4 or 5 odd job workers to the fields. The crops on the few plots of land that day had already matured. This time when he came over he found that the crops had already been picked. Replant these 2 plots of land. Let's plant something good, Rinpoche said to the rest of them. How big of a ridge do you need? An older man asked. Since the crops were different, the ridges in the fields were also different in size. For those who had done farm work, this was something that even children knew, but for the children in the city, there were not many who knew this. If Rinpoche hadn't read a lot of information these few days, he would have been dumbfounded when he heard this question. First, the 2 plots of land were divided into 5 portions. Then, the requirements for each portion were stated. Everyone expressed that they understood. After throwing all the work to them, he strolled back. No wonder so many people wanted to become officials. It felt good to throw things to others to do. When he returned, he went to look for caretaker Sher, but he saw that he was busy. Rinpoche waited at the side for a while and got caretaker Sher to write a slip for him to go out. When you go out, take 2 servants with you. Don't go out by yourself. One look and I can tell that you're not from Dayo. It's easy to get into trouble if you go out by yourself, caretaker Sher warned. It's not that messy, right? Rinpoche was shocked when he heard caretaker Sher's reminder. It's not chaotic. However, your arms and legs aren't big enough for me to pinch you. If anything happens to you it will be troublesome, caretaker Sher said as he sized up Rinpoche. Rinpoche thought about it and felt that his physique wasn't strong enough to be pinched by someone. Just the odd job workers in the beast park were all tall and sturdy, and each of them could fit in 2 people. He reckoned that even if he tied up 3 to 5 of himself together, he wouldn't be able to defeat one person. Also, the chefs in the imperial kitchen could smash a 10-centimeter thick chopping board into pieces with a single slap. He couldn't help but be impressed by this kind of martial strength. I will definitely bring an electric baton back next time. Rinpoche made up his mind and returned to his room with the note. This time around he brought a few books. One was Regional Anatomy, one was Systematic Anatomy, and one was Typhoid and Diseases. They were all prepared to be given to the Qin medicine shop. Anyway, there were plenty of these things on Earth. It would be good if he could teach them to others in this world and save a few more lives. Knowledge was precious, and it was even more precious in this world. However, to Rinpoche these things weren't important. Other than that, he also brought 1,000 vials, some syringes and catheters. This was mainly because he saw a piece of news on the internet before he came. It was about using vials to inject normal saline solution to stop the bleeding of a pregnant woman with massive postpartum hemorrhage. The success rate was almost 99%. It was easy to learn and there were no side effects. It had always been said that giving birth was like taking a trip to the gates of hell. Massive postpartum hemorrhage had a very high mortality rate. If he could easily save countless lives, why wouldn't he do it? After that, he bought a lot of vials. He could still remember the expression on the girl's face when she looked at him in the medicine shop. He reckoned that she didn't treat him as a good person. A normal person definitely wouldn't buy so many vials at once. Other than these, he also bought alum and mirabolite, which were used to tan animal hides. The food in Dayo was mainly meat, such as cattle and sheep. There were a lot of cattle and sheep hides in the beast park. They were of low value and could be used to make sofas after tanning them. After sorting out the items, Rinpoche went out and found 2 burly odd-job workers. One of them was called Teng Hulu, and the other was Tai Dao. They were very diligent and straightforward, but they weren't considered smart. The 2 of them carried the items and followed behind. The 3 of them went straight to the Qin medicine shop. Not long after entering the city, Rinpoche saw a few people fighting in front of him. There were also many people watching and cheering at the side. Your fist is too slow, did you not drink milk? Hit the chin. Hit the stomach. Sigh. You didn't even hit it, why are you so stupid? Rinpoche passed by the side and was speechless when he heard those people shouting. These people were too hateful. However, the people of Dayo were used to it. The people who were fighting inside became even more excited when they heard the clamor around them. Before Rinpoche could walk past the crowd, he heard someone shouting above him. There was also a commotion around him. When Rinpoche raised his head, he saw a face getting closer and closer to him. F***seek before Rinpoche could curse, he was pushed to the ground by someone. The person who pushed him down was a lady. She was wearing a beast skin waistcoat and her hair was tied into many small braids. At first glance she seemed to be pretty good looking. It was just that the corners of her eyes were a little bruised as if she had been punched by someone. After the lady pushed him down, she rolled on the ground and stood up. She cursed and squeezed through the crowd again. Rinpoche covered his face and let out a breath of cold air. Just now, that lady directly knocked into his face with her mouth. There was no romantic feeling at all. He just felt that his face was a little swollen. "Caretaker Rin, are you all right?" Teng Hulu and Tai Dao asked as they pulled Rinpoche up. Rinpoche rubbed his face and thought that this was really an unexpected disaster. He wanted to see what the lady who knocked him down looked like. However, a group of tall and strong people surrounded her like a wall. He couldn't see anything. He could only hear the clamor and the cursing from inside. "Forget it, let's go," Rinpoche said to the two of them while covering his face. He really couldn't get angry with this bunch of barbarians. After walking for a long distance, Rinpoche looked at his right hand. Just now, when he was blocking the attack, he seemed to have caught something soft. It was a consolation prize. When he arrived at the Qin medicine shop, there were still many people waiting to be treated. Chapter 37. There were all kinds of herbs in the house. Once they entered, they could smell the strong smell of traditional Chinese medicine. The three of them put down their things. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao looked around as they had nothing to do. Rinpoche took out the book Typhoid and Diseases and started reading. It was written in simplified Chinese. Qin Zixing definitely could not understand it. Rinpoche still had to explain it to him later. Hence, he wanted to familiarize himself with it in advance to save some time. After reading for a while, they suddenly heard noises coming from outside. A man was shouting, "Doctor, doctor, help!" "Don't panic. What's the situation?" Qin Zixing raised his head and asked. "My wife just gave birth to a son. She is bleeding non-stop. Doctor, please get me some ointment for my wounds," the man shouted. Qin Zixing frowned. He knew what was going on. If he could not find a way to stop the bleeding, the ointment would not be of much use. Hence he said, "The ointment is not very effective for postpartum hemorrhage. We have to stop the bleeding in a short period of time." I know, but how can we stop the bleeding?" The man's eyes were red. He shouted loudly, but his voice was full of helplessness. It was a common occurrence for a pregnant woman to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every year there would be more than 10 cases. This was due to the inconvenience of communication in modern society. Hence, when the man knew that his wife was bleeding, he immediately panicked and rushed here. Qin Zixing also frowned. Although this world was not that strict between men and women, it was impossible for him to help the pregnant woman with this. Furthermore, he did not have any good ideas. Finally, he sighed and said, "I will get you some ointment for your wounds. Go back and try it." In other words, it was up to the heavens to decide. This kind of thing happened frequently. Unfortunately, he was powerless. At this moment, someone suddenly appeared beside Qin Zixing. "I have a way to stop the bleeding." Qin Zixing was stunned when he heard this voice. He turned his head and saw that it was Rinpoche. He immediately stood up and grabbed Rinpoche's shoulder. "Really?" "Absolutely." Rinpoche nodded. He had heard the whole story when he was inside. He did not expect to encounter such a thing when he just brought these things over. It was a coincidence. However, he did not know that this was not a coincidence. This kind of thing happened frequently. "How do I stop the bleeding?" Upon hearing Rinpoche's words, the burly man's eyes lit up. He immediately grabbed Rinpoche's shoulders and lifted him up. "Let go." Tai Dao and Teng Hulu came out of the room. When they saw this scene, they immediately went forward and twisted the burly man's hands behind his back. Rinpoche also landed on the ground. I'm sorry. I was too excited. How can I stop the bleeding and save my wife?" The burly man didn't resist. He lowered his head like a child waiting to be scolded, a pleading expression on his face. "Let him go," Rinpoche said as he looked at him. "That person didn't use much strength and didn't hurt him. It was just a subconscious movement, but her strength was too great and she directly lifted him up." "Mr. Qin, both of you follow me," Rinpoche said to them and led the way into the house. After both of them entered the house, Qin Zixing asked anxiously, "Mr. Rin, may I know how to stop the bleeding?" Rinpoche opened the bag that he brought with him. There were 1,000 condoms inside. He took out one and said to the two of them, "Use this." Qin Zixing's eyes lit up and hurriedly asked, "May I know how to do it?" Rinpoche found a basin of water at the side, then took out a catheter and a syringe to demonstrate to the two of them. This is called a condom. First, find a clean rope and tie the catheter and the condom together. Then, insert the condom and catheter into the uterus of the pregnant woman. Speaking up to this point, Rinpoche raised his head and looked at the burly man. When he saw that the burly man was at a loss, he said, "It is inserted from the birth canal to the belly, where the child is conceived." This was the first time Rinpoche explained this to someone, and he felt a little embarrassed. However, the other two were even more embarrassed than him. However, he still had to explain the method clearly. He took the syringe, drew water from the basin and squeezed it into the catheter. After a few times, the condom swelled up and turned into a water ball. "Just do this, let the condom swell up in the belly and apply pressure to stop the bleeding," Rinpoche said as he demonstrated. "May I know how confident you are?" Qin Zixing asked. 99% confident, Rinpoche replied. "That's great, thank you so much, thank you so much." The burly man was overjoyed when he heard that Rinpoche was 99% confident. "Mr. Qin, the midwife will be delivering the baby, right? You can tell the midwife about this method and let her do it. However, you must be fast. In addition, don't use ordinary water, preferably salt water. Also, you have to control the amount of water yourself." "Alright then, I will make a trip there. Saving a life is like fighting a fire, and it cannot be delayed." Qin Zixing didn't say much. He took the two brand new condoms, catheter and syringes from Rinpoche and hurriedly left with the burly man. Although he wouldn't be of much help, he was afraid that the burly man would miss something and cause a life to be in danger. Therefore he might as well make a trip there himself and inform the midwife directly. After they left, Rinpoche sat back in his chair and continued to read Typhoid and Diseases. However, he couldn't get into it no matter how hard he tried. He only hoped that things would go smoothly. After all, it was a human life. After waiting for a long time, Qin Zixing didn't return. Rinpoche was bored from waiting and decided to wait outside. When he came out, he saw a young man treating a patient. He reckoned that he was Qin Zixing's family member or disciple. However, looking at his height and appearance, he wasn't from Dayo. Therefore he should be the former. Are you the one that I knocked down?" Rinpoche suddenly heard a woman's clear voice. He turned around and saw a woman who was about 1.7 meters tall. She was wearing a beast-skin waistcoat with a layer of underwear underneath. Her originally pretty and heroic face was now bruised and swollen. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of her mouth. Indeed, she was the one that knocked him down just now. "Why do you want to apologize?" Rinpoche asked casually. "In your dreams. I haven't even said anything about you taking advantage of me just now," the woman wrinkled her nose and said. Rinpoche was delighted. "So she still knew about it? I thought you only had fighting in your head." However, he still pointed at his bruised face. The meaning was obvious. "What happened, Nagu?" a burly man beside her asked. "Didn't I get thrown out during the fight just now? I knocked him down," Nagu pointed at Rinpoche and said. That burly man glanced at Rinpoche and didn't say anything. Anyway, he wasn't from Dayo, so it didn't matter. If he was from Dayo, then it didn't matter. Dayo people were all thick-skinned. Even if they were knocked down, it wouldn't hurt at all. No one would fuss over such things. Rinpoche guessed his thoughts and shook his head helplessly. People from Dayo and people from other countries really didn't like each other. However, Rinpoche noticed that there were a few thumb-sized whip marks on that burly man's naked body. It looked painful just by looking at them. However, that burly man didn't seem to take it seriously. Previously, he heard from Caretaker Sure that people who fought on the streets would be whipped. He didn't know if Nagu was also whipped. Rinpoche took a glance and saw some whip marks on Nagu's exposed arm. She must have been whipped along the way. Sure enough, she didn't run away. However, seeing that her expression didn't change, Rinpoche admired her a little. "Hey, I'm sorry." Just as Rinpoche was about to leave, Nagu said straightforwardly. Chapter 38. He waited at the entrance for a long time, watching the passers-by from the other world come and go. It was also a bit of fun. After waiting for an unknown amount of time, Qin Changxing finally returned in a hurry. Beside him was still that burly man. Looking at his happy face, Rinpoche knew that it was a success. Knowing that his method had saved a person, he was still a little excited, and a smile unconsciously appeared on his face. "Mr. Rin, it's all thanks to you this time." Qin Zixing pulled Rinpoche along. "Brother, thank you very much." With a face full of joy, the burly man came forward and gave Rinpoche a bear hug. Rinpoche heard his bones creaking and almost couldn't breathe. He finally knew why it was called a bear hug. It was as if he had been hugged by a bear. His chest tightened, making it difficult for him to even breathe. With Chen Zixing's help, Rinpoche finally struggled free from the man's embrace and gasped for breath for a long time. The man did not even realize that he had almost killed his savior. Rinpoche really wanted to give him a few kicks. I don't have anything good, but this knife is the most valuable thing I have on me. I'll give it to you. The big man took out a half-meter-long knife from his waist and put it in his hand. I don't need this. You can take it back. I'm already very happy to be able to save him. Rinpoche quickly declined. How can we Dayo people do such ungrateful things? You saved my wife's life. As long as I can take it out, you can take whatever you want. However, this saber is the most valuable thing I have. I will give it to you as a token of my gratitude, the burly man said to Rinpoche with a serious face. He couldn't hide the joy on his face. Mr. Rin, please accept it. If you accept it, he won't feel at ease. Chen Zixing laughed. Here you go. I'm going back to see my son. After saying that, the man turned around and left happily. Dayo people are all like this. Mr. Rin, you just have to get used to it. Chen Zixing smiled at Rinpoche as he looked at the back view of the burly man. Rinpoche looked at the dagger in his hand. It had an animal skin scabbard, and the hilt was also wrapped in animal skin. It wasn't light either, weighing at least 5 to 6 caddies. Previously, he heard from caretaker Sure that Dayo's ironware was still very valuable. An ordinary family wouldn't be able to afford such a saber even if they didn't eat or drink for a few months. But he really had no use for this thing. Metal weapons were expensive in Dayo, but they could be found everywhere on Earth. Rinpoche shook his head helplessly when he saw that the burly man had already disappeared into the crowd. He carried the dagger and went in with Chen Zixing. As soon as Chen Zixing came back, everyone stood up and greeted him. Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen. Greeted the doctor. This indirectly proved that Chen Zixing's popularity here was indeed very high. Although the people of Dayo didn't like foreigners, people like Chen Zixing were respected wherever they went. What the people of Dayo hated was the greed of foreign merchants and the haughty attitude of many people who came to Dayo and regarded them as barbarians. When they reached the patient's table, Chen Zixing pointed to the wall next to him. There was a wooden sign with some words on it. Rinpoche had seen this sign a long time ago, but he didn't know what was written on it. When Rinpoche saw Chen Zixing pointing at the sign, he asked, "What's written on it?" "It's strictly forbidden to hug a doctor," Chen Zixing said in a low voice. Rinpoche, it seemed that being too loved was also risking one's life. According to Rinpoche's knowledge, there weren't many people in Dayo who were literate. It wasn't easy for Dr. Chen to survive until now. The two of them entered the inner room and their eyes were fixed on the things that Rinpoche was holding. "What do I have here that you want?" Chen Zixing asked straightforwardly. Not only could this thing save lives, it was also extremely effective. "The formula and ingredients for the black mud cream," Rinpoche said. Chen Zixing hesitated for a moment. The penicillin that Rinpoche mentioned previously was something that he really wanted. Furthermore, according to the description, it could save even more people. It was just that it was a common occurrence for pregnant women to die from postpartum hemorrhage. Every time he encountered such a situation, he would feel very regretful as he watched young lives wither away. Most of them were only in their teens, which made him feel even more regretful. "I just want the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. Just like what I said previously, I will teach you how to make penicillin. As for these things, I will give them to you. They are more meaningful in your hands than in mine. However, I suggest that you distribute these things to the midwives and teach them how to use it in case it is too late," Rinpoche said. Chen Zixing turned to look at Rinpoche, tidied up his clothes and bowed respectfully. "I thank you on behalf of them," Chen Zixing said sincerely. "It's nothing, these things aren't very useful in my hands." Rinpoche shook his head. He bought a total of 100 boxes, which was about 2,000 yuan. Including the syringes and catheters, it was just a few hundred yuan more. This amount of money couldn't do much on Earth, and he wasn't short of money now. However, in Dayo it could save countless lives. After using these things, if you want to use them again, you must disinfect them after boiling the water. You can also use other things as replacements, such as fish bladders or animal bladders. You can study what is more suitable, Rinpoche exhorted. "We will. I will spread this method and let all the midwives know. This is a way to save lives and we should let more people know about it." Chen Zixing nodded and said solemnly. Rinpoche smiled. This Chen Zixing was indeed a good person. "Alright, a lot of time has passed today. I will teach you the production and extraction method of penicillin," Rinpoche said. After waiting for Qin Zixing to take out the few moldy fruits, Rinpoche taught him how to make the culture fluid and how to filter it. Most of the procedures were just explained and he didn't really do it. If he really did it, there wouldn't be enough time. Furthermore, some things were lacking. For example, rice and vinegar could be bought. As for seaweed or alkaline water, Qin Zixing had to figure out how to do it himself. Qin Zixing took a pen and paper to record and occasionally asked a few questions. By the time he finished explaining everything, it was already night time. Rinpoche exhorted, "Remember, when using penicillin, a small number of people will develop allergies. If this happens, it's best to stop using it." Qin Zixing put down the pen and paper. After writing for an entire afternoon, he was extremely tired. After listening to Rinpoche's words, he nodded to show that he understood. The same disease would have different effects when used by different people. This was something that he knew very well. During this period, Rinpoche took a look at the things that Qin Zixing had written down and didn't recognize a few of them. However, he could tell that the handwriting looked like it was made by a chicken's claw. Who said that doctors have good handwriting? Rinpoche immediately had this thought. These are the basics. Rinpoche passed the other books to Qin Zixing. Of these 3 books, one is typhoid and diseases and the other 2 are about anatomy. They are a different kind of medical theory and are different from your medical skills. They don't talk about looking, listening, asking, and feeling the pulse. They specialize in studying the structure of the human body. You can also refer to them. However, I don't think you can understand the words. I don't have time today. I will translate them for you when I'm free. Qin Zixing took the books carefully. He knew the value of books, especially those that hadn't appeared in the world. Perhaps one of the books could solve some of the problems that had been troubling him. Its value was immeasurable. After flipping through it, he realized that typhoid and diseases was basically filled with words and he couldn't understand it. The other 2 books were about the structure of the human body and had many anatomical drawings. Qin Zixing flipped through them and asked, "How did they study it? How can the drawings be so similar?" "They probably used corpses to study it," Rinpoche replied with uncertainty. He didn't know much about the development of Western medicine. No matter how they studied it, knowledge is always correct. That's true. Qin Zixing nodded. Chapter 39. Wait a minute, Mr. Rin. This is the formula for the black mud cream that you wanted. These are the seeds. Additionally, you will need a few things from wild beasts. Caretaker Rin, you can prepare these yourself. Aren't you afraid that I lied to you about penicillin? Rinpoche asked with a smile. Given Mr. Ren's breadth of mind, I'm sure you won't have high hopes for me. Qin Zixing said with a serious expression. Let's not talk about other things. Just this method of saving people today will save many people in the future. Thank you very much. Rinpoche took the list with a smile on his face. It felt good to be trusted by others. He lowered his head and glanced at the paper. He didn't understand a single word. Mr. Qin, tell me and I'll write it down, Rinpoche said helplessly. He asked someone to find a piece of charcoal and sharpen it into a pen. Then he listened to Qin Zixing's instructions and wrote on a piece of paper. Qin Zixing had even prepared seeds for him. It was still all right at the front. However, towards the end, Rinpoche was a little confused. There was a 6-horned dragon that was dried and ground into powder. Rinpoche's mind was filled with question marks. What was a 6-horned dragon? It couldn't be a real dragon, right? Rinpoche knew about grinding earth dragons into powder. Earth dragons are earthworms, right? He just didn't know if the earthworms in this world were any different from those on Earth. But it shouldn't be hard to obtain. At most, he could bring some back for others to raise. The last one was the green toad's saliva. Nothing else. Rinpoche raised his head and asked. No, that's all. Mr. Qin, do you have any replacements? Rinpoche asked. Qin Zixing stroked his beard. Which one needs to be replaced? Rinpoche used his finger to stroke the 6-horned dragon and green toad. Apart from the earth dragon, are there any replacements for the other 2? These things aren't hard to find. It's just that the medicinal herbs take a long time to grow and the survival rate isn't high. Also, it's a little troublesome to concoct. Qin Zixing was puzzled. Rinpoche felt that it would be better to ask for 2 alternatives. He didn't know how the creatures in this world were different from those on Earth. Having more alternatives would allow him to have more choices in the future. I can replace it, but the efficacy will be greatly reduced, Qin Zixing said. It doesn't matter, Rinpoche said. There was no need to worry about the effects of the medicine decreasing. An injury that would normally take 10 days to half a month to heal could be healed in just a few minutes with the black mud cream. The effects of the medicine would be reduced by several times. Even if it lasted for a few hours, a day or even 2 days, it would still be acceptable. Chen Zixing mentioned 2 more ingredients and Ren Baqian wrote them down. Then he carefully kept the paper in his pocket. I see that your writing is similar to the writing in the books you gave me. I've never seen it before. May I know where Mr. Ren is from? Chen Zixing asked curiously. He had been holding back this question for a long time, and only now did he ask it. China. You definitely haven't heard of it, Ren Baqian replied casually. Chen Zixing pondered for a moment. There was indeed no country called China in his memory. Mr. Chen, do you have earth dragons, 6-horned dragons and green toads? Ren Baqian asked. Since the black mud cream was made by the Chen family medicine shop, it was very likely that there were ready-made materials here. There are indeed some. What Chen Zixing said was exactly what Ren Baqian thought. Chen Zixing then led them to the backyard. Just as Ren Baqian thought, the earth dragon was an earthworm. Chen Zixing had dried them, so there was no need for Ren Baqian to bring them back. He would first go back and see if the earthworms on earth could work. As for the 6-horned dragon, it was kept in a jar filled with water. It was golden in color, had 6 small horns on its head, 4 limbs and a tail. It seemed to be an amphibious creature. Ren Baqian looked at it for a long time and felt that it looked like a salamander, but he wasn't sure. The green toad was the size of 2 palms, and its body was rather huge. Its back was full of bulging dots. When Ren Baqian heard its name, he thought it would be green in color, but it was actually brown. According to Chen Zixing, this thing was green before it matured, and it would only turn brown after it matured. Can you give me this 6-horned dragon and green toad? Ren Baqian asked. Chen Zixing stroked his beard and said, This is a small matter. However, Mr. Ren, you have to take note that if you touch the green toad with your skin, you will get a rash that is painful and itchy. If you want to cure it, you can only apply the juice of the 9-wood flower to the rash. Otherwise, you will have to wait for a month for it to slowly fade. If you want to extract its saliva, you just need to smear honey on a wooden stick and lick it clean. Understood, thank you. Ren Baqian was delighted. He didn't expect things to go so smoothly. He had already obtained the formula and ingredients for the black mud cream. He just needed to bring it back to Earth and hand it over to Qin Qing. After that, it would depend on their research. Alright, it's getting late, I still have to go back. I will teach you some other day. You can try the production method of penicillin and verify its effects. The earlier this thing is produced, the more people can be saved. Ren Baqian asked the 2 of them to carry the jar and asked for some 9-wood flowers. After asking them what they ate, he stood up and bade them farewell. Mr. Ren is kind, I admire you very much, Chen Zixing said. I just want to save as many as I can. Human life is precious, Ren Baqian said. However, he didn't notice the looks of admiration on Teng Hulu and Tai Dao's faces. They had witnessed everything that happened today from start to finish, and naturally knew the cause and effect. Not to mention other things, Ren Baqian's act of teaching others his skills just to save a few strangers made them admire him from the bottom of their hearts. On the way back, Teng Hulu and Tai Dao looked at each other with the jar in their hands and shouted, Caretaker Ren. What's the matter? Ren Baqian was in a good mood. He had obtained the formula for the black gypsum and also saved someone. For an ordinary person, saving someone seemed to be very far away from him. He felt happy from the bottom of his heart when he thought that another person's life was saved and a family was saved. In the future, if you need anything, just let us know. We will definitely do it well, Tai Dao said. Just because of what happened at the medicine store today? Ren Baqian tilted his head and looked at the 2 of them. We are not good with words, but Caretaker Ren is a capable person who cares about the lives of strangers. We are willing to work for someone like Caretaker Ren, Tai Dao nodded and continued. Yes, Caretaker Ren is a good person, Teng Hulu echoed. Ha, that's good, Ren Baqian said happily and patted their shoulders. As for the specifics he would see in the future. On the way back, Ren Baqian looked at the dagger in his hand and thought to himself, could all the daggers in this world be divine weapons? Perhaps the dagger that person gave him could cut through iron like mud? Thinking of this, he pulled out the dagger. The blade was black, half a finger thick, and there were some rust stains on it. No matter how he looked at it, it did not look like a divine weapon at all. Holding on to his last glimmer of hope, he slashed at a tree by the roadside. The tree was not cut into 2 as he expected. There was only a scar on it. Immediately he knew that he was thinking too much. Other than being thicker and blacker, it was not much different from a kitchen knife that cost $10 on Earth. Fairy tales were indeed all lies. The few of them returned to the beast park and the kitchen was already empty. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao sent the jar back to Rinpoche's house. Rinpoche went to pull the cook out of bed and said, "Come, I'll give you something good." "What is it?" The cook followed Rinpoche out of the house with a blank look on his face. "Go to the kitchen and prepare some meat first. I'll go get something." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and went straight to the room to get some spices. When he reached the kitchen he put it on the table. "Look, it's good stuff. Are these the spices that caretaker Rin uses in the imperial kitchen?" The cook opened the small bag and was pleasantly surprised when he saw what was inside. "Oh, you're quite well informed." Rinpoche patted the cook's back and said, "Hey, I have a brother who works in the imperial kitchen. Today he even asked me about you." The cook touched the back of his head and gave a simple and honest smile. "Yes, I'll tell you how to use these spices. This seasoning is for stewing, this cumin is for roasting meat, this pepper is for..." After Rinpoche told him how to use them, he reminded him, "Use them sparingly. It will take a long time for us to grow them ourselves. These things will be gone after we use them up." "Grow them ourselves?" The cook immediately lost his voice. "Of course these things are not for sale. If we don't grow them ourselves, where are we going to get them?" Rinpoche said. "However, other than the ones that are used by the imperial kitchen and you, the rest will all be mine. I still need to sell them for money." "Hee hee hee hee." The cook laughed foolishly. As long as he was given some to use, nothing else mattered. After Rinpoche finished speaking, he said to Teng Hulu and Tai Dao, "Did you hear that? I got those 2 plots of land to plant spices. The 2 of you can help keep an eye on them and make them eat more. Caretaker Rin, don't worry. Even if Caretaker Rin didn't remind us, we wouldn't slack off." The 2 of them patted their chests and said. Rinpoche believed this. Over the past few days he hadn't seen a single crafty person. He had to admit that the people of Dayo were indeed honest and capable. After waiting for half an hour, the meat in the pot was still not ready, but the aroma of the meat assailed their nostrils. The smell made them even hungrier. "Caretaker Rin, you are here? I haven't seen you for a whole day," Caretaker Shur said as he walked in. "I was delayed outside." "Caretaker Shur, what is this?" "Come and get something to eat." "What are you stewing? Why does it smell so good?" "I can smell it from afar." Caretaker Shur's eyes were fixated on the steaming pot. Rinpoche laughed. Caretaker Shur was actually here to look for food. "You are just in time." The few of them anxiously looked at the cooked meat in the pot. Each of them took a bowl and smelled the aroma. They didn't wait for the meat to get cold before stuffing it into their mouths. Every one of them cried out from the scalding heat and snatched the meat while it was still scalding. Seeing them like this, Rinpoche's appetite increased. He felt that the meat today was especially fragrant. After the few of them finished their meal, Rinpoche sat at the entrance and chatted with Caretaker Shur. Rinpoche was impressed when he saw Caretaker Shur holding a bowl of meat soup and occasionally spitting out mouthfuls of it. In this meal just now the few of them ate at least 1.5 kilograms of meat each. The few of them only ate a huge hind leg. No wonder the people of Dayo have such good physiques. Indeed, good physiques are supported by a good appetite. Chapter 40. The next morning, Rinpoche prepared some bamboo leaves and water for Tian Tian and Gun Gun. Then he brought them to a piece of flat land not far from the kitchen to look for leather. In a large open space there were poles with ropes in the middle. All kinds of furs were hung on the poles, and after some simple cleaning, they were hung there to dry. There were cowhide and sheepskin. There were about 100 odd job workers and family members in the beast park. Based on the appetite of the people of Dayo, the amount of meat they ate every day was quite large. At the very least they had to kill 3 cows and a sheep. This was under the circumstance that the sheep in this world were bigger than the horses in Dayo's previous world. Every day after killing them they would simply wash their skins and dry them. Then they would fold them into bundles and store them in the storeroom. Once they had accumulated a certain amount, they would sell them to buy alcohol. This kind of fur, which had only gone through the simplest treatment, was of very low value, so no one cared about it. Some of them were the skins of the dead animals in the beast park. Rinpoche even saw the skin of a saber-toothed tiger. There were black stripes on the yellow fur, which were much larger and denser than the stripes on a tiger. It looked more like the skin of a leopard, but the patterns on it were much larger and not circular. It was said that 2 saber-toothed tigers fought yesterday and one was bitten to death. The furs that were being dried here were all in good condition. Rinpoche covered his nose and looked at them. Then he got someone to roll up all the dried furs and carry them away. Although it had been cleaned, it still emitted an extremely heavy stench, attracting many flies and other vermin to fly around. Remove the oil film and flesh from the surface first. Rinpoche instructed as he pulled Tai Dao and Teng Hulu over. Of the 10 servants under him, 3 were in the ice cellar, 5 were in the pear field, and only 2 were here. He spent the whole morning cleaning out some leather, then soaking it in water for another 2 days before it could be used. Rinpoche tied up the rest and threw them to the side. Then he brought the 2 of them to Baishur district to look for a blacksmith to forge the fan according to the pattern. Rinpoche had considered going out by himself. However, after thinking about it, the Dayo people didn't treat outsiders very well. Furthermore, Dayo's combat power was much stronger than his. If anything were to happen, it would be too late for him to cry. In the end, he could only wait for the 2 of them and only went out after noon. When he arrived at Baishur district, he saw the same shop owner as last time. He showed the fan to him. This can be done, right? Some parts can be replaced, such as the fan blades and the base. They can be made of metal or wood. What is this? The shop owner looked at the fan with a puzzled expression. He had never seen anything like this before. Rinpoche aimed the fan at the store owner and pulled the rope all the way to the end. The blades of the fan spun, sweeping up a gust of wind toward the shop. After the rope was straightened and released, the fan blades began to rotate in the opposite direction. Feeling the wind blowing against his face, the blacksmith shop owner's eyes lit up. This thing is interesting. After receiving the fan, the owner pulled the rope behind it, and the fan blades began to spin. Then he let go and turned in the opposite direction. Then he turned the fan to his face, pulled the cord and let go. Pull the rope. Let go. Pull the rope. For a moment she was having so much fun that she forgot about Rinpoche and the rest. Rinpoche saw that the shopkeeper was having fun. After waiting for a while, he had no choice but to interrupt him. How is it? Can you do it? The shopkeeper suddenly reacted. Then we'll have to take it apart to see the structure inside. Is that okay? Yes, the lid at the back will open as soon as I lift it. The shop owner opened the back cover according to Rinpoche's instructions. The internal structure was very simple. There were only bearings, rubber rings and ropes. At first glance it looked very simple. However, the shopkeeper frowned and asked, "Where did you make this?" "What's wrong?" Rinpoche asked. "We can't reach this level. This is too perfect. The thickness of every part is the same. I really don't know how it was made." The shopkeeper pointed at the bearings inside and said to Rinpoche. Rinpoche finally understood. The bearings made in the modern era were naturally not comparable to the ones made by these craftsmen. It's fine as long as it doesn't affect the usage. However, it must be smooth. Otherwise it will affect the strength of pulling the rope and there will be noise, Rinpoche said. The shopkeeper touched his chin and said, "That can be done. We don't have this thing here." The shopkeeper pointed at something inside and said. Rinpoche took a look and saw that it was a rubber ring. This thing could be made with animal tendons, but there was no need to tell the shopkeeper. "After the first one is done, I'll check it. If it's up to standard, I'll need another 20. We might need more in the future. However, within 3 months, you can't leak this thing out and you can't let anyone else make it," Rinpoche exhorted. Initially he wanted to set a longer time limit. However, he thought that this kind of earthen fan was easy to make and others could easily understand it. Even if he restricted the shopkeeper from making it for others, as long as others bought one, they could easily find a blacksmith shop to replicate it. Therefore, I might as well limit it to 3 months. As long as the first batch of my goods appears in the market, I'll be able to make a sum of money. 3 months isn't long. However, you have to make at least another 20, the shopkeeper said. As long as you can make it up to standard. If you can't make it up to standard, no one will ask you to make this thing, right? Rinpoche said. Don't look down on my skills. Although I can't reach this level, I can definitely be smooth. The shopkeeper patted his chest and said. That sound was so loud that Rinpoche felt like his internal organs were going to come out. Can you leave this thing here for me to study? The shopkeeper asked again. He kept fiddling with the fan. Rinpoche didn't know if he liked the fan or the bearings inside. Sure. How long will it take for you to make it? Rinpoche asked. This thing can be collected the day after tomorrow, the shopkeeper said. Rinpoche calculated that he should be returning to Earth the day after tomorrow. I will give you one more day, 3 days later. Rinpoche left the fan with Teng Hulu and Tai Dao. He returned to the beast park and continued to clean the fur. In the afternoon, Rinpoche was called to the palace and brought to the imperial kitchen. Brother Rin. Upon seeing Rinpoche, Caretaker Go's facial expression twitched for a long time. Finally he lowered his head and called him brother. Rinpoche liked the character of Dayo people. As long as he said it, he would definitely do it. Even if he was unwilling, he would still do it. Furthermore, Rinpoche felt extremely comfortable when he saw a burly man lowering his head and calling him brother. The other people in the imperial kitchen greeted him with much more sincerity. After all, the condiments that Rinpoche brought were an eye-opener for them. They could proudly say that at least the items in Dayo's imperial kitchen were the most complete in the world. The imperial kitchen in the Lianyun kingdom couldn't be compared to the imperial kitchen in the Great Xia Palace. Brother Ren, what are you cooking today? One of the people in the imperial kitchen asked. At first it was a little awkward to call him Brother Ren. However, after a few times he got used to it. Rinpoche was from the northeast. Naturally, he was most familiar with northeast cuisine. Chapter 41. Although it was called stewed chicken with mushrooms, it was just a kind of stewed chicken with mushrooms. However, the taste was much better than that of ordinary chicken. Even before it was taken out of the pot, its fragrance had already assailed the nostrils, causing everyone in the imperial kitchen to salivate. The double-cooked pork was made with the meat of an animal called yin zhong. The meat was very similar to pork. The braised pork he made last time was also made with this kind of animal. There were a lot of cows in Dayo, mainly water buffaloes. There were a lot of them in the plains and lowland jungles. Many of them were farmed as well, and they were the main type of food in Dayo. After stewing the dish, Rinpoche found a place to sit. A few chefs from the imperial kitchen ran over to ask him about the details of the cooking process, such as how to add the seasonings. Rinpoche arrived one by one. Brother Rin, the manager said that you should deliver the dishes for today, a chef said to Rinpoche after the dishes were served. Oh. Rinpoche raised his head and looked for Caretaker Go. Normally, Caretaker Go was the one who sent the gifts. His Majesty asked you to deliver it after you're done cooking, the chef explained. Only then did Rinpoche nod his head. He carefully carried a metal plate with a few plates of cooked dishes and rice on it and covered it with a lid. He carefully carried it out and saw a soldier standing guard outside. They followed him all the way to the palace. When the dishes were sent into the palace, someone took them to the side to test for poison and then brought them to His Majesty. On the other hand, Rinpoche waited at the bottom of the steps. Continue with that story of yours. The Empress got up from the couch. After she finished speaking, she began to taste the dishes for the day. Just as Rinpoche had expected, other than steamed pork and double scoop, the Empress also had a preference for pine nuts and peas. Although she was an emperor, she was still a woman. She had a preference for sweet dishes. Rinpoche thought about the content of the previous lecture. It was about the battle between Sun Bofu and Yen Baihu. Next, it was about Lu Xianfeng shooting halberds at the Yuan Gate. The Empress didn't listen much and said, "It's only 150 steps, why are you making such a fuss?" There was no lack of hunters in Dayo who were able to hit their targets. Previously, when I heard you speak of it, I was thinking, you are so weak, yet your country was not destroyed. Rinpoche was left speechless by the Empress's words. The difference in strength between the people on Earth and this world was too great. There was no way to compare them. He would send people flying with a kick at the slightest provocation, and even the stone wall would have a hole in it. How could a person get up and fight again unscathed? This seemed to be very common in Dayo. On Earth, this kick would have killed him. Not to mention tearing down a city gate with his bare hands. Perhaps only Li Yuanba from the romance of the Sui and Tang dynasties could try. After talking about the three kingdoms for 4 to 6 hours, Rinpoche finally withdrew. After Rinpoche left, the Empress picked up a piece of paper beside her and looked at it again. Everything that happened to Rinpoche at the Chen family's medicine shop was clearly written on it. He's rather kind-hearted, the Empress said faintly. However, this method of his can be carried out first. However, there was another thing in the report that the Empress was very concerned about. It was the 3 books that Rinpoche took out. When Rinpoche arrived, he was clean and had nothing on him. For him to be able to take out 3 books now, it probably had something to do with him disappearing every few days. Although he didn't know where he went, it was probably related to the situation at that time. Appearing out of thin air and disappearing out of thin air, leaving no trace behind. This kind of thing made her puzzled, but she could explore it later. She was more concerned about another point. Although Dayo respected martial arts, as an empress she couldn't be so short-sighted. She had studied Great Xia and the Yin nation before. Naturally, she knew the role of scholars, craftsmen, culture, and technology. Furthermore, Dayo's predicament had always been there. Almost all the technical content was brought in by merchants. Several generations of emperors had always wanted to send people out to learn, but the results were very little. Rinpoche had once taught the method of making ice to the Beast Park's manager and taught the method of stopping postpartum hemorrhage to the people at the Chen family's medicine shop just to save a few more people. This showed that not only was Rinpoche capable, but he wasn't like the other countries that sealed off all kinds of technology and knowledge from Dayo. This allowed her to see the possibility of obtaining all kinds of knowledge and technology from Rinpoche. If he was the kind of person with evil intentions, she could use other methods to make him spit out everything he knew. However, from the way Rinpoche handled things, he could be considered as kind-hearted. Furthermore, he wasn't stingy when it came to passing on things that he knew to others. This made her feel that he could be used. What Dayo currently lacked the most was people like him. Naturally, Rinpoche didn't know what the Empress was thinking. The next morning, he brought Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to continue cleaning the leather. Rinpoche watched as the two of them used a knife to scrape off the minced meat and oil film on the leather. Their movements were extremely swift, and every time the knife landed, a piece of oil film would fly off. Seeing that it was scorching hot, Rinpoche went forward to give it a try. He extended his hand to Tai Dao and said, "Let me try." Tai Dao passed the knife to Rinpoche with a simple and honest look on his face. One cut. Rinpoche cut a hole in the cowhide with one cut. Rinpoche thought for a while and decided not to spoil things. He returned the knife to Tai Dao and went to play with Gun Gun and Tian Tian at one side. Gun Gun and Tian Tian spent most of the day eating and sleeping. Occasionally when they woke up they would play like two balls. Their actions made people howl. The people in the Beast Park shook their heads when they saw Rinpoche raising these two little things. They couldn't eat and couldn't hunt. They ate every day and were extremely stupid. They really couldn't understand why caretaker Rin liked to raise these things. However, Rinpoche didn't care at all. These were pandas. On Earth, if you wanted to see them, you had to stay far away. At most, you could take a photo with your phone. You didn't even have the chance to get close to them, let alone raise two of them as pets. Rinpoche sat on the stone slab in front of the door and looked at the two little fellows crawling around on his knees. He was extremely happy. He thought to himself that he should bring his phone next time and take a few photos of these two little fellows to post on the internet. At night, Rinpoche went to the palace again. This time he made twice-cooked pork, double-cooked pork, and pine nuts with peas. The previous dish, double-cooked pork, was the Empress's favorite. She finished half a plate of it by herself. This time the Empress asked for it by name. Rinpoche had to admit that the Empress was much more thrifty than the ancient emperors. She only had 4 dishes for a meal, which couldn't even be compared to some of the village officials. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Dayo wasn't very rich. The Empress also didn't have any extravagant habits. When talking about Cao Cao's discussion about heroes, the Empress said, "This Cao Cao was indeed a character. Unfortunately, he was too weak." Rinpoche thought for a long time and felt that the Empress was definitely referring to Cao Cao's individual strength. Regardless of whether it was Lu Bu or the other valiant generals, the Empress was somewhat dismissive. According to the Empress, the description of those valiant generals in the book was something that even the commoners in Dayo could do. Yet, they could actually become valiant generals. This showed how weak these people were. This made Rinpoche speechless. The individual strength of these people on Earth was indeed inferior to that of Dayo. However, he was actually despised. This was too embarrassing for the people on Earth. He pondered in his heart. After talking about the 3 kingdoms, he wouldn't talk about the romance of Sui and Tang anymore. Next time he would talk about journey to the west and investiture of the gods. Chapter 42. At night, Rinpoche returned to his house in the Beast Park. He carried the 2 jars containing the 6-horned dragon and the green toad respectively. He stuffed the formula and seeds of the black mud cream in front of his chest and fell into a deep sleep. He didn't know when he fell asleep, but he subconsciously turned over and almost knocked the jar upside down, waking him up with a start. He opened his eyes. Although it was dark around him, he could still tell that he had returned to his bedroom in China. He moved the 2 jars to one side, switched on the lights, and opened the mesh cover. He was relieved to see that the 2 fellows were still alive and kicking inside. He covered the lid again and looked at the time. It was not yet 4 o'clock. Since he couldn't sleep, he went to the living room to watch a movie on the television. When he wanted to go out for breakfast in the morning, he realized that it was a little cold outside. He looked at the date and realized that he had been to the other world 5 times. Each time he was there for 9 days. Adding the 3 days on Earth, it was a total of 12 days. These 5 times meant that he had been there for 2 months. It was already September. He went back to the house and found a jacket that he used to wear. It was a little tight on his body, and it seemed that he had put on weight recently. He looked at himself in the mirror. His face didn't seem to have put on much weight, but his body shape was indeed more shapely than before. He went out for breakfast before calling Qin Qing. These few days Qin Qing had called him twice, but as usual no one picked up. Other than him there was another call from Qin Bing. "You rascal, you have been missing for such a long time again. Your whereabouts are getting more and more unpredictable." Qin Qing ranted for a long time after picking up the call. "I have the formula for the black mud cream," Ren Baqin said plainly. "Ah, where are you?" Qin Qing didn't have time to complain to Ren Baqin and immediately asked. "I will send it to your father's company in a while. Speaking of which, has the research on the black mud cream been organized?" "I don't know the specifics. I didn't ask much. However, it seems that the core personnel are still lacking. Should be done soon. Once your formula is here, I reckon that we can start." "All right, I will be there in a while." Ren Baqin hung up the phone and went back to move everything into the car. He drove to a foreign trade shop to buy some casual clothes before heading to Qin Qing's father's company. When Qin Qing saw him alight from the car, he went over and gave him a bear hug. Following which, he asked doubtfully, "Have you been putting on some weight recently? You've become much stronger." Ren Baqin smiled and said, "You've put on some weight." Looking at Qin Qing, he was still the same. Nothing had changed. Ren Baqin joked, "You and Jiangnan are about to get engaged, so stop wandering around. Be careful that you need to take medicine in the future." "Don't worry, I've been paying attention. I've been taking the medicine prescribed by an old Chinese doctor for more than half a year," Qin Qing said with a laugh. Ren Baqin couldn't help but give a thumbs up. "You're indeed far-sighted. You brought everything? Let's go up." Qin Qing pulled Ren Baqin along. "Wait, he's still in the car." Ren Baqin turned around and took out a box filled with waste paper from the trunk. He took out 2 cans from the box and stuffed one of them into Qin Qing's hands. "Take it, be careful." "What is this?" Qin Qing asked curiously. Ren Baqin carried one himself, and the 2 of them stepped into the building. Qin Qing's father was waiting for the 2 of them in his office. Other than him, there was also a middle-aged couple. "Uncle Qin." Ren Baqin nodded and greeted him as he entered. "Yes, Baqin is here. Let me introduce you. This is Professor Sun Qing and this is Professor Su Shan. Both of them are experts in the field of medicine. Both of them heard about the effects of the black mud cream and were very interested in it. That's why they came back from overseas." "Hello." Ren Baqin nodded at the 2 of them. Su Shan returned a smile, but Guo Qing seemed to be thinking about something. It was as if she didn't hear what Qin Qing's father said and didn't see Ren Baqin. Ren Baqin didn't feel that he was being left out. He heard that many researchers were eccentric and didn't know the ways of the world. This Sun Qing might be one of those people. Ren Baqin and Qin Qing placed the cans on the table. "What's this?" Qin Qing's father asked. 2 of the ingredients, the formula and the seeds, I've brought them with me." Ren Baqin took out the formula and placed it on the table. Qin Qing took a glance at it and exclaimed softly, "What are these? Qingyang grass? Harpy? What a weird name." Hearing Qin Qing's words, Su Shan walked over and asked, "Can I take a look?" Ren Baqin glanced at Qin Qing's father. Qin Qing's father nodded. "Sure, the contract has been signed and there's nothing to hide. I'll hand it over to you sooner or later." Su Shan picked up the formula and looked at it. She had a puzzled look on her face. "What are these?" Ren Baqin naturally knew what was written on the formula, but he didn't know what was written on it. If Ren Baqin didn't bring the real thing back, there would be no difference between this formula and not having it. Ren Baqin took out a paper bag from his pocket. There were 6 or 7 small bags in it and all of them had words written on them. It should be a different name, just like how there are so many names for pigs. "I've brought the seeds back, we'll know when we plant them." The rest of them agreed with Ren Baqin's explanation. They compared the words and the formula on the paper bag one by one. All the plants matched. The remaining 3 were related to animals. "This earth dragon is an earthworm, right?" Su Shan raised her head and looked at Ren Baqin. "Yes." "The other 2 are in this jar," Ren Baqin said. "Hexagonal dragon, it should be an amblystoma. Many of them are raised for ornamental purposes. Why is it in the formula? Furthermore, this kind of creature is mainly found in Mexico. It shouldn't have existed in the past. It seems like this formula hasn't been around for a long time. However, why did the person who wrote this formula keep it in his hands all this time? I've never heard of it before. If it was said that the ancient formula was just discovered and sorted out by someone, then it was very likely that everyone knew about it. However, if it was developed in the past few decades, why didn't anyone know about it? This was rather strange. Take a look at this hexagonal dragon. Is it what you said it is? Rinpoche opened the jar first. Without waiting for Su Shan to speak, Qin Qing spoke first. Isn't this the hexagonal dragon raised at home? It's for ornamental purposes, but it can actually be used to make medicine? Yes, it is. Su Shan confirmed. Rinpoche thought for a while and said, the hexagonal dragon is used as a substitute. In the past, it was an animal called Pinkyuan. Later on, it was discovered that the hexagonal dragon was more effective. Hence, it was used as the main ingredient. Look at the back of the formula. Pinkyuan, this is the previous formula. Rinpoche immediately swapped the original and substitute ingredients. Anyway, he didn't write which was the original ingredient and which was the substitute. Su Shan saw that it was indeed Pinkyuan and felt relieved. The recovery ability of the hexagonal dragon is very strong, and so is the earth dragon. It is indeed possible to make use of this special effect to make medicine. Su Shan was deep in thought. In that case, we are still missing a green toad. What is it? Rinpoche opened the lid of the largest jar. The few of them peeked their heads over and saw a brown frog that was the size of 2 palms. It looked like a toad. However, its size was a little too big. This is a green toad? Yes, but you must be careful. This thing is very rare and is almost extinct. It wasn't easy to get this one. This kind of green toad likes to eat honey. Dip a wooden stick in the honey and it will lick it to get its saliva. In addition, you must be careful. It is very poisonous. How poisonous? Among the frog species, the most poisonous frogs are brightly colored. Although this one is slightly bigger, it doesn't look like it is very poisonous. Sun Qing walked over and said, generally speaking, with the exception of a few, most poisonous creatures will also make themselves very bright to warn their natural enemies. See? I am very dangerous. Only weak creatures will form a protective color that is similar to the color of the surrounding environment. This is the choice of evolution for thousands of years. As Sun Qing explained to the few of them, he put his hand into the jar. He seemed to be very confident in his knowledge. Obviously, in his knowledge, there were no such highly poisonous frogs like the ones in the jar. This kind of green toad is really poisonous, Rinpoche warned. Don't worry. Even if it is really poisonous, as long as there are no wounds on your hands, it will be fine. As Sun Qing spoke, he put his hand into the jar and touched the back of the green toad. Immediately, the green toad moved restlessly in the jar and let out a gurgle sound. The sound was dull and a little like the roar of thunder. Rinpoche looked at Sun Qing's actions and didn't continue to speak. Well, you are a senior intellectual. You are a PhD. You have the final say. Chapter 43. Sun Qing touched the back of the green toad with his fingers before taking out a handkerchief from his pocket and wiping his hands. The poison of toads isn't strong and it's fine to touch it with your hands. As long as you don't put it in your eyes or eat it, you'll be fine, Sun Qing continued. Ah, I see, Rinpoche said. He was trying to hold back his laughter, but he put on a serious face and said, at that time they told me that this kind of green toad is very poisonous and it would cause unbearable pain and itchiness. I have been very careful these few days. There are a few types of frogs that are very poisonous, but this one doesn't belong to them. Sun Qing nodded. He wasn't sure if the poison had started to react, but before he finished his sentence, he felt that his fingers were a little itchy. I'm going to wash my hands, Sun Qing said and went straight to the washroom. There was a washroom in Papa Chen's office. Sun Qing went in for a minute and came out with a strange look on his face. It seemed like he was trying to endure something. I'm sorry, this is called green toad, right? Although it doesn't belong to the few types of highly poisonous frogs that I know of, it is indeed poisonous. Moreover, it can poison people through skin contact. From the looks of it, the toxicity is not small. As he spoke, Sun Qing stretched out his hand. His entire right hand was covered in red dots from his wrist to his entire wrist. I haven't seen any records of this green toad. It should be a frog that isn't in the records. It has a lot of research value. But before that, I have to go to the hospital. Before I leave, I have to express my joy to join this team. Sun Qing forced a smile and nodded to them. Professor Sun, are you all right? Papa Chin stood up and asked. Su Shan also walked forward to check on his hand. From the current reaction, it shouldn't be fatal. But since it's an unrecorded species, we can't rule out the possibility that it's a rare or even unseen poison. Ren Baqin looked at Sun Qing in a daze. This person's reaction after being poisoned seemed to be a little different from ordinary people. No wonder he was a professor that was one level higher than a saint. The next level would be a martyr, right? Ren Baqin started to admire him. Seeing that Sun Qing was about to leave, he quickly called out to him, Professor Sun, I have the antidote here. Sun Qing turned to look at Ren Baqin and said, I guessed so too. Carrying such a rare and fast-acting poison, as long as one isn't stupid, they would bring along the antidote. Ren Baqin's face twitched. He didn't know whether he should like or hate this person. Anyway, it was quite annoying to talk. He took out a small paper bag from his pocket. Inside was a kind of dried flower petal. Crush it and soak it in water before applying it to your skin, Ren Baqin said. All right. You probably won't be able to use this thing, right? Then I won't stand on ceremony. Guo Qingwen took out 2 flower petals and put the paper bag into her pocket. Ren Baqin looked at his actions and didn't say anything. Sun Qing took a teacup and threw the petals into it. He then took out a pen from his pocket and used hot water to disinfect the tip of the pen. Then he crushed the petals. He looked up at Ren Baqin and asked, Cold water or hot water? Ren Baqin shrugged. I don't know. It should be cold, right? Sun Qing took some out and wrapped it in a piece of paper. Then he poured a small amount of cold water into it, stirred it and wiped it on his hands. 10 minutes later, his hands were covered with red spots. It looked as though he had contracted some infectious disease. It was a little scary. Sun Qing suddenly said, The pain and itch are alleviated to a certain extent. It's effective. He then added some water to the flour paste and rubbed it on his hands again. Sun Qing and Su Shan observed carefully. After another 10 minutes, the red spots on his hands started to diminish. This thing is not bad. It's very effective. What kind of flour is it? Sun Qing asked. 9-wood flour, Ren Baqin said. What other uses does it have? I'm not sure about that, Ren Baqin replied honestly. Sun Qing nodded and said to Papa Qin, It's worth researching. When will the research start? It can already be started. There are still some equipment that will arrive later. It shouldn't affect the early stage of the research, Papa Qin said. Following which, they talked about the research lab. Ren Baqin and Qin Qing weren't interested. After saying goodbye, they went outside to smoke. Papa Qin looked at Ren Baqin's back and smiled. This was to show that he didn't want to be involved in the future. Papa Qin was very satisfied with this performance. He was really afraid that Ren Baqin, who was young and full of vigor, would want to make a career out of it. It would be easy for him to get into trouble. Now that the research was successful, he would gain fame and status, and Ren Baqin would get most of the profits. Ren Baqin accompanied Qin Qing to smoke a cigarette outside. He hadn't smoked for a long time. After smoking half a cigarette, he felt a little dizzy. However, it still felt good. How about it? Do you want to go and play tonight? Qin Qing poked him and asked. Oh yes, I haven't asked. What's the situation between you and my classmate? Ren Baqin immediately thought of Dong Haiqing. What else could it be? Qin Qing spread his hands. I know she's your classmate. I sent her back that night and didn't even go upstairs. I'm most afraid of this kind of relationship. It's too troublesome. Where's Jiangnan? Let's have lunch together. I haven't seen her in a while since I've been running around. She should be at work. Let me make a call. After Qin Qing hung up the phone, he said to Ren Baqin, She's at the company. Let's go together later. Are you going tonight? Qin Qing asked again. It's still more fun with you around. There's no point in going alone. Am I your only friend? Ren Baqin asked with a smile. It should be easy for an influential person like Qin Qing to find someone to accompany him to go to the nightclub. You're the only one who can go out to drink and pick up girls. Qin Qing shrugged his shoulders. The two of them waited outside for a long time. When they saw Sun Qing and Su Shan coming out from the nightclub, they nodded at them. They went in to greet Papa Qin and went to look for Jiangnan. Papa Qin invited Ren Baqin to stay for lunch. However, Ren Baqin felt uncomfortable eating with him. He felt more comfortable eating with Qin Qing. After lunch, Qin Qing returned to the law firm. Ren Baqin went to buy 2 sets of clothes and went online at home. Now that the black mud cream's formula was settled, he could finally relax. As long as he waited for the black mud cream to hit the market, he would be able to earn a lot of money. He didn't have to worry about his future. He took the time to make a call home. Naturally, he was nagged by his mother again. In the middle of the call, his father took over the phone and asked him about the company he was talking about. In the end, he told him to be careful and not to be cheated by others. At night, he went to the bar with Chen Qing. At least he didn't return empty-handed. The girl that night was young, but she was very wild. After tossing and turning for half the night, when Rinpoche woke up the next morning, his back was still sore. Looking at the snow-white shoulders that were exposed under the blanket, Rinpoche shook his head. Both parties had a purely physical relationship. Of course, they couldn't be tainted by unbearable feelings. Naturally, there was no need to communicate. He put on his clothes and prepared to go home to catch up on sleep. Chapter 44. After surfing the internet for 2 days, Rinpoche once again returned to that world. This time he didn't bring anything with him. When he slept, he wasn't worried about leaving anything behind on Earth. When he woke up, the sky was already bright. He went out to see how the 2 little chaps were doing, but they weren't outside. There were bamboo leaves scattered on the ground and a puddle of water not far away. It seemed like they had just left. Rinpoche looked around and found the 2 little chaps outside a cage in the living area of the wild beasts. One of them was leaning on the cage and peering inside. The other one was rolling on the ground and continued to roll. Then it hit its head on a rock. Rinpoche almost laughed when he saw the guy sitting on the ground in a daze after knocking down the rock. These 2 little chaps had familiarized themselves with the surrounding environment over the past few days. In addition, it wasn't too hot this morning, so they came out to explore. The one that had been rolling was Gun Gun. It shook its head, ran behind Tian Tian, and bumped its butt, causing Tian Tian to tumble. The 2 pandas immediately rolled into a ball. Following which, the 2 chaps staggered and continued to explore. There was an extremely beautiful big bird in the cage just now, and it didn't pay attention to the 2 chaps. The 2 little chaps didn't go far before they became interested in another iron cage. Rinpoche had an impression of this cage. Inside were 2 rabbits that were as big as dogs and had mouths full of fangs. When the 2 chaps went over, the rabbit pounced on them and hit the iron cage. It made a gurgling sound from its throat, scaring the 2 chaps into a ball. Rinpoche then picked them up with each hand and walked back. When he returned to the entrance of the house, he put the 2 chaps there. In the end, Tian Tian hugged Rinpoche's arm and didn't let go. It was as if it was glued to his arm. Gun Gun also hugged one of Rinpoche's legs and climbed up. Rinpoche managed to shake off the 2 chaps with great difficulty. After breakfast, he went to the fields to take a look. The 2 mu of land used for seasoning had already been plowed. A few odd job workers had nothing to do, so they plowed the sweet potato field again. Seeing this situation, Rinpoche called for 2 people to follow him back to the house to get the Sichuan peppercorns, sesame seeds, cumin peppercorns, and sprouted sweet potatoes to prepare for planting. Rinpoche couldn't help much with the planting. Ever since he was young, he had never even touched a hoe. Rinpoche told them about the cultivation methods that he had seen on the internet. The 5 odd job workers nodded their heads in agreement. They didn't expect that there were so many ways to cultivate. They looked at Rinpoche with admiration. As for the sweet potato, it was much simpler. This thing was very adaptable. It could dig a hole and bury it at a certain distance. In the first week, he had to water diligently to prevent the seedlings from dying. After the second week, it would be easier. Until the harvest, he only had to turn over the sweet potato vines a few times to prevent them from taking root. After settling these matters, Rinpoche dragged Teng Hulu and Tai Dao to the blacksmith shop in Baishur district to check on the progress of his fan. Shop owner. Rinpoche entered the shop and greeted the shopkeeper. The shopkeeper looked up at him and took out a wooden box from behind. Inside the box were the fan and the custom-made one that Rinpoche had brought. Take a look. The shop owner stuffed the fan into Rinpoche's hands. Rinpoche took a closer look. The fan blades were covered in layers of decorative patterns. It was obvious that they were forged with a hammer and looked rather beautiful. If the fan blades were to be sharpened, it could probably be used as a murder weapon. The bearing inside was also rather smooth. It seemed that there was no problem. Rinpoche took out a rubber ring from his bosom and attached it to a rope before pulling it. The fan started to spin as expected. Rinpoche's hand that was holding the fan trembled a little. It seemed that the roundness of the bearing was not enough. However, he was already very satisfied with the workmanship. Good craftsmanship. Ren Baqin gave a thumbs up and said, "Of course. My craftsmanship is among the top 3 in the entire Baisher district." After hearing Ren Baqin's praise, the shopkeeper immediately raised his head proudly. Ren Baqin chuckled. "Just do as I said before and make another 20. The price is still 2 taels of silver each. How long will it take?" After hearing Ren Baqin's words, the shopkeeper revealed a smile. After thinking for a while he said, 10 days. The main problem is that the thing inside needs to be polished slowly. Ren Baqin knew that the shopkeeper was talking about the bearing. 10 days was acceptable. He immediately paid the deposit and wrapped the 2 fans in cloth. Teng Hulu and Tai Dao each carried 1 fan. After leaving the blacksmith shop, they first went to Jingyuan Road to see how the most important shop was doing. When they arrived, they saw that the shop's door was wide open. 2 men were working inside. The bottom of the wall was covered with wooden planks. The top of the wall was covered with white ash. The floor was also covered with a layer of wooden flooring. There were also some chairs and wooden tables in the room. Everything was made of solid wood. All the wood was coated with a layer of sumac sap. It had a slightly pungent smell. However, this substance was completely environmentally friendly. Although the smell was a little pungent, it would dissipate in a few days. The coating of this layer of lacquer prevented the wood from rotting easily and also prevented it from attracting bugs. In this world, only furniture makers would add color to the sumac sap. However, Ren Baqin had completely retained the natural color of the wood. It looked fresh and natural and it was comfortable to enter. After standing outside and looking around, Ren Baqin did not go in. Instead, he brought the 2 of them back to the beast park. After putting down the things, Ren Baqin pulled the carpenter Tong Jia into the beast park and whispered to him softly. Tong Jia was more than 1.8 meters tall. He had a shaved head and would bare his arms whenever he was free. His bronze-colored muscles were exposed and he looked more like a thug than a carpenter. However, he was a carpenter in the beast park. His main job was to repair the houses and beast pens. His craftsmanship was not very good and was barely passable. However, Ren Baqin had seen the things he made and felt that they were not bad. At least, this level of craftsmanship was not bad on Earth. Ren Baqin pulled Tong Jia and gestured as he whispered to him for a long time. At first, Tong Jia was at a loss. When he knew that they were going to make a box, he immediately said, "This is easy." Then they gathered a pile of wood and started sawing it to make a box. The others saw that the 2 of them were acting mysteriously and did not know what they were doing. The 2 of them spent the whole afternoon making a box with a thin wooden grid in front. They placed the fan in the box and stuck it. Then they made another box and drilled a row of small holes at the bottom. Then they put the cloth through the holes and fastened a button. Ren Baqin put the box into the box and wiped his sweat. For the whole afternoon, Tong Jia worked with his bronze-colored muscles on his upper body. He kept giving instructions at the side and ended up exhausting himself. Looking at the weird thing that Ren Baqin was making, Caretaker Shi came over and asked, "Brother Ren, what are you making?" Ren Baqin was startled by the loud voice. He raised his head and saw that it was indeed Caretaker Shi. His voice was definitely gifted and it was at the maximum level. "Wait a minute, I will show you something fun later." After hearing what Ren Baqin said, Caretaker Shi smiled and waited at the side to see what Ren Baqin was going to make. "You, Teng Hulu, go and get some ice from the ice house. Tai Dao, go and get a bucket of water," Ren Baqin shouted. After a while the 2 of them returned. Ren Baqin grabbed a handful of crushed ice and placed it in the box. Then he filled the box with water. The ice water started to drip down along the cloth. Ren Baqin estimated that it was about time. He pulled Caretaker Shi to the front of the box and made it face the grid. "Wait here, I will start soon." He instructed Tai Dao to place a stool under the box and increase the height of the stool. He then stood beside the box, held the rope that was used to pull the fan and pulled it up. Chapter 45. What's this? Caretaker Shi's eyes widened in surprise. "Air cooler," Ren Baqin said. He pulled the rope a few more times and shouted, "Hulu, come and pull the rope." Then he ran to the air cooler to enjoy the cool breeze. Teng Hulu imitated Ren Baqin and pulled the rope before releasing it. The cool breeze immediately blew on Ren Baqin's body, making him feel very comfortable. It was so comfortable to enjoy an air cooler in this world. Tong Jia also ran to Ren Baqin's side. He wanted to try out the thing that he had been busy making for the whole afternoon. He squeezed slightly on Rinpoche's body and almost made him tumble. After Rinpoche stabilized himself, he glared at him. Tong Jia gave him a simple and honest smile. Rinpoche was so angry that he wanted to kick him. However, the cool breeze on such a hot day was too comfortable. He opened his arms and closed his eyes in satisfaction. Unfortunately, he did not enjoy it for long before the cool breeze disappeared. When he opened his eyes, Caretaker Sure was squatting in front of the box, trying to figure out how the cold breeze came out. The cold breeze blew on his face. How could it still reach Rinpoche who was behind him? How can this thing blow out wind? Caretaker Sure asked as he looked into the box. Rinpoche thought about how to explain. After some thought, he simply said, "You won't understand even if I tell you. What do you think will happen if we sell this thing?" Rinpoche squatted beside Caretaker Sure and laughed. "It should be possible to sell it, right? But it's a little troublesome. Someone needs to pull the rope, right?" Caretaker Sure said with uncertainty. "It's not should, it's definitely," Rinpoche said with certainty. Caretaker Sure's business sense was too bad. However, this was normal. Most people in Dayo were like this. "Do you remember that I mentioned selling ice? This thing is more effective than putting ice in the house. It cools down faster," Rinpoche said. "It's such a good thing, it's better to send it to Her Majesty," Caretaker Sure said after some thought. "It's a little too crude." Rinpoche naturally knew that he had to send one to the Empress first, but the one in front of him was really not presentable. Indeed, the box on the outside was made of wood that had just been sawed open. Although the woodworking skills of this world were quite good, and they were all connected with mortise and tenon joints, which would definitely attract a lot of rich people back on Earth, it still couldn't hide the crudeness of the box. In the modern world, everyone knew that the packaging had to be beautiful, classy. An item worth 100 renminbi had to be packaged with 100 renminbi to make it look like it was worth 1,000 renminbi. Although the main function of the air conditioner was the function of the air conditioner, if Rinpoche had a choice, he would rather have a $100 air conditioner with a $200 package. Can it create complex patterns? Rinpoche turned his head and asked Tong Jia. "I don't know. It depends on what it looks like." Tong Jia rubbed the back of his head and answered honestly. "Let me think about what pattern to make," Rinpoche said. Now that it was so simple and crude, there was no point in gifting it to the Empress. No matter what, it had to be done beautifully. Even if she was the Empress, a woman's nature wouldn't change, right? What is the nature of women? Glittering gold? Like the dragons? You can't move when you see shiny things? This was the first thought that crossed Rinpoche's mind. Soon after, he shook his head. After all, this was the Empress. No matter how poor Dayo was, the Empress wouldn't lack gold and gemstones. Furthermore, Dayo had a lot of gemstones. It was just that most of them were deep in the mountains and were difficult to excavate. Most of them were picked up in the open. In that case, what else could a woman like? Cute. If it was an ordinary woman, it might be possible. When he thought about how the Empress sent the polar bear flying with a slap, Rinpoche felt that it was impossible. After thinking for a while, Rinpoche couldn't figure out anything. He shook his head and decided not to think about this matter for now. He found a chef to cook a small meal for them. After that, Rinpoche returned to the house. There was no entertainment at night in this world. Other than making babies after dark, other than sleeping, Rinpoche was still not used to this kind of schedule. Since he couldn't fall asleep, he sat at the door and teased Gun Gun and Tian Tian. The two little chaps were originally lying on their backs on the ground. After he woke them up, they climbed onto his body. As a result, the two little chaps stopped moving when they climbed onto his knees. After taking a closer look, he realized that they had actually fallen asleep. Rinpoche had no choice but to look up at the starry sky. The starry sky in this world was still very beautiful. When he looked up, he could see countless stars. Among them there were 2 starlight rivers and a huge disk. He wasn't sure if it was a nebula. This kind of starry sky was magnificent and he was momentarily dazed. While looking at it, Rinpoche suddenly thought of an idea. If he were to take a picture of this starry sky and post it on the internet, would those netizens and astronomers go crazy? It was a pity that he didn't bring his cell phone. Another idea immediately popped up in his mind. If he were to put this starry sky on a box, it would definitely be magnificent. After thinking of this idea, he immediately couldn't sit still. He looked down and saw that the two little chaps were actually drooling all over him. He quickly put them down and ran to look for Tong Jia. He thought that Tong Jia had already fallen asleep. He didn't expect him to be smiling foolishly at the air cooler and pulling the rope with his hand. "Come out, I have an idea." Ren Baqin went forward and pulled Tong Jia's arm, wanting to pull him up. In the end he couldn't move him even after using all his strength. Ah! Tong Jia turned his head and looked at Ren Baqin with a silly smile. Ren Baqin looked at that silly smile, clenched his teeth and kicked Tong Jia's leg. Get up and come out with me. Tong Jia then got up and asked, Caretaker Ren, what's wrong? Come out first. Ren Baqin called Tong Jia out of the house, pointed to the starry sky above his head and asked, Can you put this starry sky on the box? Oh. Tong Jia was at a loss. Just carve it, I will think of a way to do the rest, Ren Baqin said. Oh, it should be possible. I see these stars every day, I am very familiar with them, Tong Jia said with a simple and honest face. That's it then. Tomorrow, carve this starry sky on the box, especially these two galaxies in that circle. You must not burn them. Also, carve some stars that you are more familiar with. Okay, I can do this, Tong Jia immediately said. Is one day enough? Yes, it won't even take one day. All right, you should settle this matter tomorrow. Do I need to draw it first? Ren Baqin asked. No need, it's all in my head. Ren Baqin didn't say anything else after hearing what Tong Jia said. He hummed a tune and went back to his house to sleep. The next morning Ren Baqin went to look for Tong Jia with a biscuit in his mouth. He sat beside Tong Jia and watched him dismantle the box and carve the starry sky on a few surfaces. Ren Baqin took out the air cooler and placed it on his knees. He pulled the rope from time to time. In the afternoon Tong Jia raised his head and shouted, Caretaker Ren, it's done. Chapter 46. There were dye and sumac sap in the beast park. After all, the beast park belonged to the royal family. The things they used were much better than the commoners. The box had a total of 6 sides. The bottom side was completely flat. The other 5 boards were facing upwards. Wood shavings were sprinkled on them. After pressing them down a few times, the wood shavings were swept away. This way the holes in the box were basically filled with wood shavings. Then, a black and blue dye made from an unknown fruit was mixed with the sumac sap. After that, the few boards turned dark blue. After finishing, Ren Baqin put the boards aside. He looked at the sky and estimated that it was almost time to eat. He went to the kitchen to eat. There was a big courtyard outside the kitchen. At this moment there were more than 10 tables. This was the time when the entire beast park was the most crowded. Regardless of gender, everyone was gathered here. There were even naked children wrestling there. The adults were happily watching from a distance and didn't care. Ren Baqin saw a 6 or 7-year-old child being thrown to the ground with a piece of skin on his knee. He didn't care at all. He stood up and started screaming. Each of them bared their fangs and brandished their claws like a crab. Children who grew up in such an environment were used to it. Caretaker Ren, sit here. Someone stood up and shouted. Ren Baqin looked and saw Tai Dao. Although he had stayed in the beast park for some time, he didn't have many opportunities to eat with the others. Including today, it was only the second time. Usually he was busy with something or was in the palace. He would only go to the kitchen when it was dark. Ren Baqin sat with Tai Dao and the others. He and his 10 subordinates formed a table. When the dishes were served he took a look. There was roasted lamb leg, roasted lamb ribs, boiled beef, a pot of wild vegetable soup, and a plate of stir-fried eggs with vegetables. When the dishes were served, everyone ignored Ren Baqin. In the blink of an eye, the plate of stir-fried eggs with vegetables was gone. Each of them had a bowl of wild vegetable soup and were eating the lamb ribs. Ren Baqin blinked his eyes and was speechless. All he saw was a bunch of dirty hands sweeping past, and then there was nothing left. In Dayo, meat was cheap and vegetables were expensive. Almost every meal was meat. 2 dishes of vegetables were gone in the blink of an eye. Furthermore, this group of people didn't have the habit of using chopsticks. Chopsticks came from Great Xia. Usually only rich people and officials would use them. Ren Baqin slurped the wild vegetable soup, nibbled on a piece of lamb chop, and ate some of the dry rations here. This type of dry food was a type of coarse grain. It was coarse, a little harsh on the throat and a little sour. However, none of them despised it. There were also refined rice and noodles, but only the rich could afford them. It was already good enough that the people in the beast park could eat this. It was said that the people in the mountain stockade ate meat for every meal, and their supplementary food consisted of berries and wild vegetables. On Earth, eating meat was considered good food, but here it was the most basic diet. If you were to trade a caddy of wild vegetables for a few caddies of meat, there would be plenty of people willing to trade with you. Fortunately, Dayo still had another product, which was tea leaves. There were many wild tea trees on the mountain. As a result, the people of Dayo didn't have to fight over a brick of tea like the people of the grassland. After finishing his meal, he returned to Tongjia's place. Seeing that the dye on the wood was almost dry, he placed the panel upside down on the ground and used a hammer to knock on the back twice. When he picked it up again, most of the chips had fallen off, revealing holes in the wood. Rinpoche was delighted when he saw the first wooden plank. Although it hadn't met his requirements, the first step had already met his expectations. Following which, he did the same for the other planks and placed them together. Rinpoche was stunned. The dark blue plank was filled with light-colored stars. The two Milky Way and the nebula were embellished on it. It really looked like the starry sky he saw last night. Subconsciously he looked up at the sky. At this moment, the sky had just turned dark and there were only a few stars. They were sparse and looked like pockmarks scattered on the sky. It was far from the magnificent sight he saw last night. He lowered his head and continued to look at the plank. The only problem was that the dye on the plank wasn't evenly applied. However, this was a small problem and it would be fine after 2 more brushes. Thinking of this, Rinpoche picked up the seasoning beside him and brushed another layer on the plank. This time, he didn't have to worry about the seasoning getting into the holes. He just needed to take a look and make sure that there was no problem. "Caretaker Rin, is this okay?" Tong Jia came to Rinpoche's side and asked. Rinpoche searched his chest pocket. He originally wanted to find a piece of silver as this craftsmanship deserved a reward. He couldn't just let the horse work and not feed it. However, he didn't have anything on him. Usually when he didn't go out, he was too lazy to carry silver in his chest pocket. "Beautifully done." Rinpoche gave a thumbs up. "Leave it here first, I will come back tomorrow." Rinpoche patted Tong Jia's shoulder, which was half a head taller and half a head thicker than him. "All right. Do I need to put it on?" "No need, this will do. Wait for the color to dry and put it in the house. Take it out tomorrow morning and brush it again." After Rinpoche finished speaking, he strolled back with his hands behind his back. Tian was sprawled out and sleeping outside the door. Gungun's but was on the stone slab that was more than 10 centimeters high. Its head was on the ground and it was lying upside down. Rinpoche walked closer and could even hear light snoring sounds. The 2 little guys' bellies rose and fell, so he touched them. The 2 little guys grunted in dissatisfaction and turned over to continue sleeping. The next morning he put a few ingots of silver into his chest pocket and pulled Tai Dao and Teng Hulu out with a few planks. He was going to melt the silver and drip it into the holes on the planks that were arranged according to the position of the starry sky. The dark blue background was dotted with silver stars. It must be extremely beautiful. When they reached Tongjia, Rinpoche took out a piece of silver that was worth about 1 tael and handed it to him. "Take it, this is for you." "How can I ask for money to work for Caretaker Rin? I have a monthly salary." Tongjia waved his hands. "This is for you, don't talk nonsense." Rinpoche immediately threw the piece of silver to him in a parabola. Tongjia hurriedly caught it. "Thank you, Caretaker Rin." Tongjia held the silver and smiled. This piece of silver was equivalent to his monthly salary for more than half a month. Rinpoche nodded his head and looked at the planks carefully. The dye on them had just dried and after 3 rounds of coloring, they looked much more beautiful. Although some parts were deep and some were shallow due to the different grain of the wood, it already looked rather beautiful. He shouted for Tai Dao and Teng Hulu, who were behind him, to carry 2 or 3 planks each and follow behind him. Halfway through, Rinpoche took out the few pieces of silver from his chest pocket and stuffed them into his waist pocket. Silver was really heavy when one carried too much of it. It was really uncomfortable to keep it in one's chest pocket. When they arrived at Baishur district, it was still the blacksmith shop from before. "Shopkeeper, melt this piece of silver and pour it into the holes on the planks." "You must make it flat," Rinpoche shouted as he took out a piece of silver and tossed it in his hand. The shopkeeper came over and looked at it carefully. Then he looked at the piece of silver in Rinpoche's hand and said concisely, "It's not enough, you need another piece." Rinpoche threw another piece over and the shopkeeper nodded his head. "All right, come back in 4 hours to collect it." Rinpoche led the 2 of them to Jingyang Road to check on the shop. In the end, not long after they turned into Jingyang Road, they heard the angry voice of a woman coming from a shop by the roadside. "We spent a lot of effort to make this piece of skin. This is the white skin of a sharp-toothed tiger, and there are no scars at all. Yet it can only be exchanged for half a bucket of salt." When Ren Baqin heard this voice, he immediately turned around and saw two familiar figures in the shop. One of them was the woman named Na Gu and the other should be her brother. He did not expect to see the two of them again after only a few days. They were holding a roll of skin in their hands. Among the rolls of skin, one of the white skin was opened and displayed by the two of them. Chapter 47. A do was a unit of measurement. A do was about 6 caddies. Half a do was about 3 caddies, which was about 3 taels of silver. 1 tael of salt per caddy was equivalent to an ordinary person's monthly income. This price was indeed expensive. He remembered some nutritionists on Earth said that an ordinary person should consume 5 grams of salt a day. That was 3 taels of salt a month. A family of 3 would consume about 1 caddy of salt a month. This was very cheap for people on Earth, but it was extremely expensive for people in Deo. Even the chefs in the Beast Park used less salt in their food. In Deo, meat was a main dish and also a staple food. On one hand, salt was expensive. On the other hand, it was inedible if it was too salty. From the food that Rinpoche ate in the Beast Park, people in Deo ate at most half of the amount of salt that people on Earth ate. It could be seen that people in Deo were very frugal with salt. An ordinary family in Deo could barely afford to eat half a caddy of salt a month for a family of 3. Even so, salt was indeed a huge burden. It wasn't the first time that something like this happened in the shop, and it wouldn't be the last. People had to eat salt, but Deo didn't produce salt. They could only be at the mercy of these merchants. Similarly, people in Deo didn't know how to tan fur. If the fur wasn't sold, it would rot in a short period of time. With these factors added together, the foreign merchants in Deo seemed to have formed a tacit understanding. Whether it was the price of fur or the price of salt, they were almost the same. This way they could obtain the biggest profit. Rinpoche stood at the entrance of the shop and looked at the dispute inside. He shook his head slightly. This was the consequence of a country lacking in resources and technology. "Let's go," Rinpoche said. He brought Tenghulu and Tai Dao to the entrance of the shop. There was nothing much to see inside, so they turned to the Chen family's shop. Chen Zixing had been anxiously waiting for Rinpoche for the past few days. He couldn't understand a single word of the 3 books in his hands. This made him extremely anxious. After seeing Rinpoche, his eyes lit up. "Mr. Rin, you are finally here. I have been waiting for you these few days. I promised you that I would definitely translate for you." Rinpoche laughed. After Chen Zixing finished treating the patient, he asked his disciple to take his place. He pulled Rinpoche into the inner room and carefully took out 3 books from a box. Rinpoche picked up various treatises on typhoid and diseases, and asked Chen Zixing to prepare a pen and paper to record the contents. Following Rinpoche's reading, Chen Zixing's hand moved quickly on the paper like a chicken's claws. It was so fast that it looked like an illusion. Rinpoche couldn't help but admire the speed at which he wrote. Looking at his handwriting, he was even more impressed. He reckoned that even a cryptographer wouldn't be able to crack it. After reading for less than 2 hours, Rinpoche felt hungry. However, it wasn't easy to come here. Seeing that Chen Zixing had no intention of resting, Rinpoche gulped down water with all his might. "If you're hungry, drink more water to fill your stomach." After reading for 3 hours, Chen Zixing's eyes were wide open and his body was drenched in sweat. Rinpoche had no choice but to stop. If copying this thing tired him out, it would be a great sin. When Rinpoche stopped, Chen Zixing immediately threw away his pen. His hand was trembling like a chicken's claws. "I'm so tired," Chen Zixing shouted loudly. He grabbed a jar of water and poured it into his mouth. After Chen Zixing finished drinking the water, his right hand was still trembling. He didn't forget to raise his head and ask Su Wen, "How much have you written?" "About 8 more times." Rinpoche looked at the thickness of the book and said. Chen Zixing clenched his teeth and shook his hand. "I'll get my disciple to come in and write." "Forget it, I still have something to do. I'll come back another day," Rinpoche said. When Chen Zixing heard this, it was as if a heavy burden had been lifted off his shoulders. He heaved a sigh of relief. All right. It seemed like he was really exhausted after reading for more than 2 hours just now. Rinpoche reckoned that if he had to write continuously for more than 2 hours, which was equivalent to 3 hours, he would probably tremble even more than Chen Zixing. He brought Tenghulu and Tai Dao, who had long fallen asleep on the bed, to the blacksmith shop. Just as they walked out of the medicine shop, they heard an indignant voice from the side. "Our animal hides were only exchanged for 1.5 bushels of salt." The stronghold can't even last a few days. We might as well rob that shop tonight. When Rinpoche heard this voice, he was elated. They were really fated to meet again. He turned his head and saw Nagu and a burly man standing at one side. Nagu's face was pale and her mouth was hanging so much that one could hang a soy sauce bottle. Don't talk nonsense. You should go back and see if you can hunt for more prey these few days. The burly man was carrying a bag and lecturing her. The bag should be filled with the salt that the two of them exchanged for. It's a pity that we can't eat the salt water in the mountains. Otherwise we wouldn't need to buy salt from them. How is that salt water? That is poisonous water. Even animals don't eat it. In the past, some people have eaten it. Although it has a salty taste, they would get goosebumps and vomit after eating it. Some people would even faint and die. If we want to eat that, we might as well rob their shop at night. The burly man snorted coldly. Rinpoche was about to walk past the two of them. When he heard this, he was startled and immediately stopped. Both of you. Rinpoche turned around and cupped his hands. Who are you? The burly man looked over with a fierce look. Ah, you are that. Nagu recognized Rinpoche. I heard both of you talking about salt water just now. May I know what it is like? Rinpoche inquired. When the burly man heard his question, he snorted coldly and ignored him. He had just suffered a bellyful of anger from those few shops and had no place to vent it. I am not from the Yun nation, nor am I from the Qin nation. I am also not from Great Xia. I am currently working in the Beast Park. The matters between the two of you and those merchants have nothing to do with me. Logically speaking, I should be considered a Dayo citizen now. Rinpoche looked at the attitude of the two of them. He didn't need to think to know the whole story. This is caretaker Rin of the Beast Park, Tai Dao interrupted from behind. The Beast Park was attached to the palace. When the two of them heard that Rinpoche was working in the Beast Park, their expressions became better. They turned around and sized up Rinpoche. Why are you asking about salt water? Someone has already thought of a way to make it edible. Even the wild beasts in the mountains don't eat it. If it's poisonous, it really can't be eaten. However, perhaps we can refine it to remove the poison. Then you won't have to worry about eating salt anymore, Rinpoche said. Impossible, the burly man said resolutely. Don't bother. Someone has already thought of that, Nagu said. Her attitude towards Rinpoche was much better than the burly man. Perhaps it was because she had bumped into Rinpoche before, so she didn't feel so unfamiliar with him. Can I know after listening to both of you talk about the salt water first? Rinpoche asked. That water comes from a pool on the mountain. The water is salty, bitter and smelly. We call it the Black Pool, Nagu said. The water is black? Is it the smell of rotten eggs? Rinpoche quickly asked. Chapter 48. After hearing Nagu's words, Rinpoche was more certain. When he heard about the poisonous brine, he already had an idea. Although it was poisonous, everything in the world was made up of ions and molecules. Under certain conditions, there would definitely be a chemical reaction. This meant that the salt could be extracted or the toxicity could be eliminated. The black water was also emitting the smell of rotten eggs. It was very likely to be a kind of black brine. This kind of thing existed on Earth, and it had been refined and used by the ancient people using the crystallization of wisdom nearly 2,000 years ago. This was the predecessor of the famous well salt. After understanding the situation in this world, Rinpoche specially researched all kinds of information about well salt. In fact, it wasn't just the sea that produced salt. People in Sichuan, Tibet, and other places used various methods to extract salt from nature, which was a necessity for daily life. There were also various methods. Sunning salt from natural brine on the surface and salt crystallization from saline alkali land were the simplest. Without these conditions, there were many other methods to produce salt. Well salt was one of them. Among them were black brine wells, yellow brine wells, and stone wells. They mainly extracted seawater that accumulated underground after the evolution of the Earth's crust. Or in other words, metamorphosed seawater. The black brine well referred to the poisonous black brine. This metamorphosed seawater was usually 300 meters underground. However, due to earthquakes or other reasons, it would occasionally form springs or pools. It was precisely because of this that Rinpoche immediately thought of this when he heard them mention the poisonous brine. Do you have that brown brine there? It's also salty and poisonous, Rinpoche immediately asked. The reason why he asked this was because black brine contained a large amount of sulfate and yellow brine contained barium. Both types of brine were poisonous to the human body. However, if they were mixed together in a suitable ratio, the sulfate and barium could be converted into barium sulfate crystals. This would eliminate the toxicity and allow the extraction of well salt. Of course, the premise was that the black pool was indeed black brine. Furthermore, there were no other poisonous ingredients in it. According to the short description just now, Rinpoche felt that the first possibility was very high. As for the second possibility, it was hard to say. No. The burly man replied coldly. Even though he knew that Rinpoche worked in the beast park, it only made him less hostile. It didn't mean that he would treat Rinpoche kindly. In fact, Rinpoche's thin and weak body looked similar to the people of the Yin Nation and Great Xia. He didn't like people like him. This had already penetrated deep into his bones. Yes. Nagu suddenly thought of something and turned around to refute the burly man. The last time we met in the mountains, Dagong was so thirsty that he drank a mouthful of water. After that, he didn't have any energy for the entire afternoon and shot an arrow straight at the toothed beast's face. You were almost pierced through by the beast. Wasn't that water what he said? Humph. The man snorted coldly and turned his head away. Nagu turned to look at Rinpoche and said, "There's a crevice in the mountain. The water there is exactly like what you said, but it's a little brown and can't be drunk." Rinpoche was delighted to hear this. He was just asking in passing. He didn't expect that there would really be one. "May I know where your village is?" Rinpoche asked. "What are you doing?" Nagu immediately became vigilant. "I don't know where your village is. Where can I find the black water pool and the other water?" Rinpoche asked. "Why are you looking for this thing? Do you think you can use it as salt? I already told you that it's poisonous." Nagu looked at him suspiciously. Since it's poisonous, there must be a way to detoxify it. Everything in this world reinforces and counteracts each other. "Humph, I don't believe you," Nagu said straightforwardly. "You have to try to find out. If you really want to look for it, I can hire you as a guide and use salt as revenge. How about that?" Rinpoche tried to tempt her. Nagu rolled her eyes and stuck out a finger. "I'm a good hunter. If you want to hire me as a guide, you will need at least half a caddy of salt a day." Rinpoche looked at her outstretched finger and thought about what she said. He was very curious. If she wanted half a caddy of salt, what would she do? Stick out 2 fingers? At the thought of this, Rinpoche subconsciously stuck out 2 fingers and asked, "How many is this?" Nagu was stunned at first. Then she flew into a rage and asked, "Do you think I'm a fool?" She immediately flashed her fists, which were 1 size bigger than those of the women on earth. She didn't forget to bare her teeth at Rinpoche like an enraged cat. Rinpoche estimated the strength of the Dayo people and looked at Nagu's fists. He estimated that if he was hit in the chest by such a small fist, he would probably vomit his liver out. "Half a caddy of salt, I agree." Rinpoche immediately changed his words. Well, if you have a good hunter like me as your guide, you will benefit greatly." Nagu retracted her fist, raised her head and proudly said with her chest puffed out, "Are you really from the beast park?" Nagu thought for a while and asked again. Rinpoche took out a sign from his pocket and said, "Look at it yourself." "I don't recognize it. I don't understand it." Nagu spread out her hands. "I told you long ago that this is Caretaker Ren from the beast park. Do you think he would impersonate you to deceive you?" Tai Dao said. Nagu looked at Tai Dao and then at Rinpoche before saying, "I'll believe you first. Our village is on 9 Peaks Mountain. After you leave the city, head southwest and you will reach there in 1 day. There is a luowing horn at the foot of the mountain. If you blow it, I will hear it." "What horn at the foot of the mountain? Where can I find it?" Rinpoche spread out his hands. How was it possible to find a horn at the foot of the mountain? What was the difference between this and looking for a needle in a haystack? "It's not a horn, it's a luowing horn. You don't even know what a luowing horn is? There is a stick erected at the foot of the mountain. The luowing horn is hanging on it." Nagu widened her eyes and looked at Rinpoche. Rinpoche saw that Nagu was looking at him as if he was an alien who didn't even know what a luowing horn was. He turned to look at Tai Dao and asked, "What is a luowing horn?" A luowing is a wild beast in the mountains. It has a single horn and is as fast as lightning. When the horn is plucked from its head, the sound can be heard 5 kilometers away. Tai Dao explained. "Can it really be heard 5 kilometers away?" Rinpoche had a doubtful look on his face. What did it mean to be heard 5 kilometers away? 10 kilometers was about 5 kilometers. It would take about an hour to walk. Even if it was in an open space, To be heard 5 kilometers away would require at least 120 to 130 decibels. It was probably the sound of an airplane taking off or thunder. Rinpoche didn't believe that a horn could be blown so loudly. Tai Dao smacked his lips and said, "There are usually big-eared monkeys in the village. If they can hear the sound of the luoyang horn from afar, they will know that there are guests coming." Rinpoche finally understood. He turned to look at Nagu. He wanted to ask her where the luoyang horn was, but she probably wouldn't be able to explain it clearly. "In that case, let's go back first. If we are going to look for the Black Pool, we will go to Nine Peaks Mountain to look for you. Remember to bring salt," Nagu reminded him. "I won't forget. In that case, goodbye." Rinpoche cupped his hands. After walking for a distance, Tenghulu asked, "Caretaker Rin, can salt really be extracted from the Black Pool?" "It's not extracting, it's refining. As for whether or not it's harmless, it will depend on the situation," Rinpoche said. He wasn't very confident and could only say half of it. "If that's the case, that would be great." Tenghulu was a little excited. "This matter requires Her Majesty's approval," Rinpoche said unhurriedly. "As long as Caretaker Ren has a solution, Her Majesty will definitely support it," Tenghulu said. "There will definitely be official positions that will be awarded." Rinpoche grinned. This was also one of the reasons why he asked about this matter. Since he was here, he couldn't possibly stay in the Beast Park and be a caretaker forever, right? Or would he be satisfied by making some items from Earth and earning some money? If he was in a world similar to ancient China, he might really do that. There was nothing wrong with being carefree. However, there were too many unknowns in this world. Without a high status, he wouldn't be able to understand too much. For example, he hadn't seen the Kirin until now. It was said that there was someone in the palace in charge of it. Chapter 49. When he arrived at the blacksmith shop, Rinpoche saw a few blue wooden boards placed at the side. They were like the night sky. Countless silver dots formed a river that spanned across it. When he took a few steps forward, the melted silver dots reflected the light, giving him the illusion that he was looking at the galaxy at night. "It's done, take it away. The remaining silver from your wages is enough," the shop owner said without raising his head. Rinpoche felt that this creation was magnificent, but the shop owner did not seem to feel anything. Due to the low technical content, he was not willing to take a second look. When Rinpoche walked closer, he felt that it was much more beautiful from afar than up close. However, he was already satisfied with this. It was enough for him to reach this level. After looking at the front of the 5 wooden boards, there was nothing to nitpick about. Tai Dao and Tenghulu carried the boxes back to the Beast Park. They first went to Tongjia's place to assemble the air cooler and placed it outside the house. Rinpoche crossed his arms and looked at it from all angles. The effect didn't seem to be as good as before. It seemed that it was too bright. Under the direct sunlight, even though the silver dots were sparkling, some of the flaws in the box were magnified. Why was the effect so good in the blacksmith shop just now? Naturally, it was because of the lack of light. Rinpoche was well aware that it was easier to conceal the flaws of an item in a dark place. For example, when he looked at himself in the mirror in the bathroom, he always felt that he was already handsome to a certain extent. However, when he looked at himself in the mirror under the sun, he immediately felt that it wasn't his own face. This was a tragic story. However, with such an experience, he immediately moved the air cooler back into the house. It was indeed more pleasing to the eye now. Especially after he closed the door and lit 2 oil lamps, Rinpoche immediately felt that this air cooler was already a fighter among air coolers. "Does it look good?" Rinpoche crossed his arms with a satisfied look and asked Tongjia without turning his head. "Caretaker Rin, if you say it looks good, then it looks good," Tongjia replied honestly. Rinpoche glanced at him. Who said that this fellow was simple and honest? He asked someone to move the air cooler back to his house. Rinpoche originally thought that the Empress would summon him to the palace today and he would be able to directly present the air cooler to her. However, no one came to the palace until nightfall. Rinpoche went to the kitchen and found half a leg of lamb. He cut it into slices, returned it to the wok and stir-fried it. He returned to his room and slept. When he woke up, he was back in the real world. Nothing much had happened in the past 3 days. He had nothing better to do, but he had been drinking beer for 3 days straight. In addition, he had gone out to buy a few things over the past 2 days. One was an e-book device that stored information on salt wells, the development of smelting, and the development of agricultural tools. Another was a few novels including Journey to the West, Three Kingdoms, Investiture of the Gods, and a few web novels. These could be used to pass the time. If the Empress wanted to listen to stories, he wasn't afraid of forgetting the content. This thing could be used for about 20 days on a full charge, which should be enough. The other item was an essential self-defense item that Rinpoche had forgotten on his previous 2 trips back. An electric baton. It was slightly bigger than a palm and looked similar to a flashlight. It was said that it could discharge electricity for 20 minutes before it lit up. Normally, it would only take a few seconds to a dozen seconds, and it could be used about 100 times. As for electric current and voltage, he did not know much about it. As for its power, the boss mysteriously told him that even a strong and burly man would faint after being poked by it. Rinpoche reckoned that with the physique of a Dayo person, a few seconds would definitely not be enough. Even if it couldn't knock out the other party, it could still numb the other party's body and make them unable to move. Otherwise, if he encountered any trouble outside, he would not even have a means of self-defense. With his physique and strength, even if a few of them were tied together, they wouldn't be able to withstand a single pinch. Having an electric baton would at least be safer. If he encountered any trouble, he could just poke him with the electric baton. I don't believe that you guys aren't afraid of electricity. Hopefully, this electric baton would be as effective as what the boss said. He definitely wouldn't dare to poke himself as he was afraid of pain. Tong Jia, that silly fellow, looked like he had thick skin and flesh. Let's go back and try poking him. If it didn't work, he would come back and settle the score with the boss. Lastly, there was the camera. Rinpoche really wanted to take pictures of the things in this world, such as Tian Tian and Gun Gun. If he were to go back and post them on the internet, it would definitely be very popular. After all, while those scientists were still guessing whether there were extraterrestrial life forms, he had already arrived in a world that was different from Earth. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell anyone about this. He remembered someone saying that not returning home after becoming rich was like walking at night in brocade clothes. Now, it wasn't just a matter of being rich anymore. He was the only one in the entire world. Unfortunately, he couldn't tell anyone about this. He didn't even dare to tell an anonymous story on the internet. He could only use this method to share his feelings of wanting to show off with others. After charging the electric baton, Rinpoche put the electric baton and the e-book in a pocket and returned to that world while asleep. After waking up, Rinpoche took out the camera from the bag and went out. Sure enough, he saw Yuan Yuan and Gun Gun lying on their backs. Before he raised these 2 little chaps, Rinpoche had always thought that animals slept on their backs. In the end, after raising them, he realized that these 2 chaps didn't have any sleeping postures and didn't forget to act cute while sleeping. Well, he took 2 close-up shots and then zoomed out to take pictures from all angles. The 2 little chaps then shook their heads and crawled over to hug his calves while humming non-stop. From top to bottom, Rinpoche took a few more pictures of the panda hugging his thighs before hanging the camera around his neck. He teased the 2 chaps for a while before going to fetch them water and prepare breakfast. After eating breakfast, Rinpoche put the electric baton on his waist and strolled to look for Tong Jia. Tong Jia was leaning against the wall and picking his teeth with his fingers. He had a signature silly smile on his face. Rinpoche didn't know why he was so happy every day. Tong Jia. Rinpoche shouted. Hey, caretaker Rin. Tong Jia jogged all the way over and didn't forget to shake his fingers. Rinpoche saw a small black dot being flung to the ground by him. Tong Jia, I have something to discuss with you. Caretaker Rin, just say it. Tong Jia said repeatedly. Caretaker Rin was very generous and rewarded him with 1 tael of silver for a day's work. Tong Jia wasn't smart, but he wasn't stupid either. Of course, he knew that Caretaker Rin was powerful and that he had to hug him tightly. I'll poke you with this as a test. Is it okay? Rinpoche took out the electric baton that looked like a flashlight from his waist and smiled kindly. What's this? It's okay. Caretaker Rin, you can poke me. Tong Jia looked at the gadget in Rinpoche's hand. It looked like a stick and didn't even have a sharp point. How powerful could it be? He immediately said generously. Chapter 50. After a long time, Tong Jia got up from the ground and looked at the little thing in Rinpoche's hand with fear. He took 3 big steps back as if he had seen a ghost. Rinpoche looked at Tong Jia's expression and felt a little embarrassed. He smiled kindly, but Tong Jia hid further away when he saw his smile. However, Dayo people's resistance to electric shocks was average. They were only slightly stronger than the burly men on Earth. It seemed like the boss was not lying when he said that a burly man could be knocked unconscious. Although Tong Jia did not faint, he trembled for a long time and fell to the ground. He only recovered after a long time. How do you feel? Rinpoche asked Tong Jia. Numb, can't exert any strength, feel nauseous and a little painful. What is that? Tong Jia hid far away from Rinpoche and even retched to the side. Well, it was similar to how earthlings felt after being electrocuted. Rinpoche waved his hand at Tong Jia, stuffed the electric baton at his waist and strolled to the field. From afar he saw a few people sitting at the edge of the field and chatting. When they saw Rinpoche, they patted their butts and greeted, "Caretaker Rin. I'm just here to take a look." Rinpoche scanned the field with his eyes as he spoke. He could tell that the field had just been watered. Remember to water it regularly, or else the sun is too strong. After a week, the new sprouts will be able to withstand the sun, Rinpoche exhorted. Caretaker Rin, don't worry, we will remember this, the few odd job workers replied. After Rinpoche confirmed it, he relaxed and sat at the entrance. Brother Rin, Caretaker Sure walked over from afar. The two shaved ice shops are opening for business today. Do you want to go and take a look? You are the one who suggested this business, but you have not been there until now. After listening to Caretaker Sure, Rinpoche thought for a while. Since he had nothing to do, he might as well follow them. Rinpoche grabbed the two little fellows by their necks and pulled them down from his legs. He got up and went back to his house to take some silver and followed Caretaker Sure out. The two shaved ice shops were located at Gujiazhai and Yuelu. The best location at Jingyang Avenue had not been fully installed yet. The two of them went to Gujiazhai first. This was the main residential area for the commoners and also the largest district in the city. The shop was located at the end of the street, and there were only a few people in front of the shop. It was a far cry from what Rinpoche had expected. According to Rinpoche's expectations, even if it wasn't crowded, there should at least be a large group of people. But what he saw now was a burly man sitting on a stool at the door with a towel draped over his shoulder. There was only one person standing behind the bar counter. There was no one else. Hey Dad, why are you here? When the burly man sitting at the entrance saw Rinpoche and Caretaker Sure walking over, he stood up from his stool and took 2 steps forward. The moment he opened his mouth, his voice traveled half a street away. The voices of this father and son were definitely passed down from generation to generation. Just by listening to this voice, Rinpoche dared to say that this was definitely their biological son. Furthermore, the son had surpassed the father. In the future, if someone were to offend him, he would not have to do anything else. He could just ask Caretaker Sure and his son to sit beside him and chat. That person would probably break down in less than an hour. You brat, you are still talking. I brought someone over to see how you guys are doing, Caretaker Sure yelled at Rinpoche. Rinpoche's head buzzed. He immediately scuttled backward like a startled rabbit. He jumped 3 steps in a row before he felt that he was out of the range of the duo's sonic boom. Usually, when Caretaker Sure was the only one speaking, Rinpoche would have to stretch his head further away. After some time, Caretaker Sure realized that he could still lower his voice. Of course, that was only relative to Rinpoche. Now that both father and son were here, it was better for him to hide further away. Brother Rin, this is my son, Sure Qingshan. Caretaker Sure introduced his son while reaching out to place his hand on Rinpoche's shoulder. When he turned his head again, Rinpoche, who was just beside him, was now 2 meters behind him. Brother Rin, why are you lagging behind? Let me introduce you, this is my son. Caretaker Sure waved at Rinpoche. Rinpoche's feet seemed to have grown roots and he refused to move forward no matter what. He cupped his hands and said, "Hello, hello. Are you the Caretaker Rin that my father mentioned? My father said that you are a smart person and know a lot of things." Sure Qingshan walked to Caretaker Sure's side and spoke to Rinpoche. Half of the people on the street turned their heads to look at him. Rinpoche was embarrassed. To be called smart in front of him, it seemed that he had not had the chance to do so since he graduated from primary school. Especially when half of the people on the street heard it, it was really too shameful. Someone not far away immediately laughed. Caretaker Sure turned his head and looked over. It was a shop that was opened by the Yun Nation and specialized in selling daily necessities. The shop owner stood at the door and could not hide his smile. "Are you mocking my brother?" Caretaker Sure's words were full of malice. Even though he had been in Dayo for a long time, his fierce-looking face was still very intimidating to the shop owner. "Why would I? I suddenly recalled something from the past." The shop owner laughed. "Forget it, let's talk inside." Rinpoche walked forward with an awkward look on his face. Caretaker Shi glared at the shop owner before bringing his son into the shop. After the few of them entered, the shop owner sneered. Smart people? There are many smart people in this world, especially when compared to you Dayo people. Everyone in the Yun nation is smart. He looked at the shop beside him and pondered for a long time. Until now he still did not know what this shop did. A restaurant was not a restaurant and a shop was not a shop. Initially he saw that there were many tables inside and thought that it was a restaurant. Only later did he realize that it was not a restaurant. Forget it, who cares about them? The shop had been open for a long time, but there was not a single person inside. No one knew what was sold inside. If they were to do business like this, it would close sooner or later. The weather was too hot and it was better to stay indoors where it would be cooler. The shop owner could not be bothered with the shop next door. He turned around and went back to find a place to rest. After entering the shop, Ren Baqin sized it up. There were almost no changes in the shop. It was just tidied up, cleaner, and there were a few more tables and chairs. Not a single person in the morning? Caretaker Shi asked. No. Shi Qingshan touched the back of his head. He had a simple and honest look on his face and lowered his voice. It seemed that they were used to speaking like that outside. When they returned to the house, they would subconsciously lower their voice. It was the same for ordinary people. Their voices were generally louder outside than inside. This was a kind of habit. One could only blame this father and son pair for being too loud. Ren Baqin walked one round in the house and frowned. Suddenly he thought of a problem. Why did he not see the signboard on the shop when he came in just now? Where's the signboard? Ren Baqin stretched out his hand and pointed outside the door. The signboard above the door, it's not up yet, right? It was supposed to be delivered this morning, but old Lu drank too much last night. In the morning he said that it was almost done. It will be delivered in the afternoon, Shi Qingshan replied honestly. There was not even a signboard and no one knew what this shop was for. It would be strange if someone could enter. Chapter 51. An hour later, there was an additional table at the entrance of the shaved ice shop. The person who previously stood behind the bar counter was called Shi Shigu. This name sounded cultured, but he was still a burly man. He was from the same family as Caretaker Shi. At this moment he was cutting fruits at the entrance of the shop and scraping the ice. First he scraped the ice off layer by layer. Then he placed the fruit pulp inside and poured some fruit juice over it. Just like that, a bowl of fresh shaved ice was made. Meanwhile, Shi Qingshan displayed his talent with his loud voice and shouted, "Shaved ice! Fruit shaved ice! Cool down and quench thirst! Come and try shaved ice on such a hot day!" Once he shouted, half the street could hear him. Ren Baqin held the freshly made shaved ice and slurped it, putting spoonfuls of it into his mouth. Eating shaved ice on such a hot day was indeed comfortable. After a while, Caretaker Shi also held the freshly made shaved ice and sat beside Ren Baqin. A few pedestrians who were sweating profusely came over and stretched their heads over the table. What's this? Fruit shaved ice. This is ice that can only be found in the north. Eating it on such a hot day will immediately relieve the heat and cool down from head to toe, Shi Qingshan said. Those few people were tempted when they saw Ren Baqin and Caretaker Shi holding the orange shaved ice drizzled with fruit juice. They asked, "How much is it?" 5 coins. If it doesn't taste good, you can smash my stall. Shi Qingshan gestured with his palm. "Give me one," a burly man immediately shouted. "All right, watermelon, orange, or green lotus. Which flavor do you want?" Shi Shigu asked while scraping the ice. "Watermelon." The burly man looked at the watermelon shaved ice in Ren Baqin's hands. After a while, the shaved ice with fruit pulp drizzled with fruit juice was placed in his hands. The burly man sized it up. "Are those fine pieces of shaved ice?" After putting a spoonful of it into his mouth, the burly man's eyes widened. "So cold? Not bad, not bad. Good stuff." The burly man took the lead and waved the spoon in his hands so fast that it almost left afterimages. Seeing him like this, the others also became interested. "Give me one. Give me one with orange." Not long after, there were 7 or 8 people around, all waiting for the shaved ice. This thing was made quickly, but it took a bit of effort to scrape the ice down. After a while, everyone had one. As for the burly man, he was already eating his second one with a satisfied look on his face. "Oh, there's poison." The burly man suddenly clutched his chest and his expression changed. Hearing that it was poisoned, the others almost threw their bowls away. "Toxic your sister." Ren Baqin couldn't help but say, Your stomach must have been irritated by eating so much cold food in such a short period of time. Everyone looked at the bowl in their hands, looked at Rinpoche, and then looked at the burly man. There was complete silence. The burly man had a constipated expression on his face. His open vest revealed his pectoralis major, which was trembling. After a while, he recovered and looked at the bowl in his hand. That scared me. I thought I was poisoned. Then she looked at him in surprise and asked, "How did you know? Isn't this common knowledge in the north?" Rinpoche rolled his eyes. Anyway, this was common knowledge on Earth. Eating a big mouthful of ice cream could easily irritate your stomach and cause stomach pain. Moreover, you were waving your spoon like a phantom and you ate 2 bowls in a row. It would be strange if your stomach didn't hurt. Do you really think you're made of iron? Seeing that the burly man was fine, everyone was relieved. Someone asked Shi Qingshan and simply went into the house to eat. The big man looked at the bowl in his hand. "Shopkeeper, can I take it away?" "Bring your own bowl," Shi Qingshan said. Only then did the burly man put down his bowl and squeeze out of the crowd. Rinpoche and caretaker Shi watched from the side for a while. There were more and more people buying shaved ice. There were also some people sitting in the shop. Rinpoche and caretaker Shi finally felt at ease. They rejected caretaker Shi's idea of going to another shop to take a look and strolled back. This way, as long as the reputation of the shaved ice shop spread, there wouldn't be any problems. With Dayo's scorching hot weather, Rinpoche wouldn't believe that the shaved ice shop wasn't profitable. "Cheesy Xuan, I heard that you are the #1 expert in Dayo and one of the top 10 experts in the world. I, Long Wanli of Hanbei, am here to seek your guidance." Suddenly, a thunderous voice resounded through the air, causing the entire Jingyang road to fall silent. "Cheesy Xuan, I heard that you are the #1 expert in Dayo and one of the top 10 experts in the world. Hanbei Long Wanli is here to seek guidance." After 3 consecutive voices, the entire Jingyang Avenue became noisy. Countless people came out of the shops on both sides of the street and looked in the direction of the voice. When Rinpoche heard this voice, he immediately became interested. Is this a challenge? Listening to this voice, it's 10 streets ahead of caretaker Shi and his son. He's definitely an expert. Let's go and see where it is. Rinpoche was excited. After being here for so many days, this was the first time he encountered such a situation. Even though there were daily fights in the city, where fists met flesh and people were frequently kicked out, it wasn't as interesting as a duel between experts. It's the Imperial City? Caretaker Shi quickened his pace. Not only the 2 of them but many other people also squeezed forward and directly brought the 2 of them into the crowd. Rinpoche, who was squeezing through the crowd, was slightly stunned when he heard caretaker Shi. "Who's Cheesy Xuan?" "It's Her Majesty," caretaker Shi said faintly. Only now did Rinpoche know the name of the Empress. Even though he heard that the Empress was the #1 expert in Dayo, he didn't know how to react just now. After all, the Empress didn't look old, and there were many civil and military officials in the imperial court. There were also experts who popped out of nowhere. Rinpoche had always thought that the so-called #1 expert in Dayo was an exaggeration. Looking at the current situation, that person was really the #1 expert? Originally, Rinpoche thought that he was here to challenge a general. He didn't expect it to be the Empress. Rinpoche couldn't help but say that this person came to the capital to challenge the Empress. This person won't be shot to death by thousands of arrows, right? Rinpoche asked subconsciously. That depends on Her Majesty's mood, caretaker Shi said uncertainly. Will Her Majesty really fight? Rinpoche asked curiously. Wouldn't it be a little too degrading for the Empress to personally fight and kill others? Furthermore, if there were any mishaps, it would be a big problem. As the saying goes, a gentleman doesn't stand under a collapsing wall. Even though there was no such saying in Dayo, the Empress in the throne room wouldn't fight and kill others, right? That depends on Her Majesty's mood, caretaker Shi repeated. Have you seen Her Majesty fight before? Rinpoche heard that the Empress seemed to have fought more than once. Of course I have. Last year there were more than 10 people who wanted to challenge Her Majesty. This year there's only 1. Have they been beaten into submission? Rinpoche asked. Just now, that person said that the Empress was one of the top 10 experts in the world? It sounded impressive. They have all been beaten to death. Caretaker Shi sneered. Chapter 52. Just now, that person mentioned the top 10 experts. What's going on? Ren Baqin asked another question. I heard that it was arranged by someone from Great Xia. Anyway, we don't care about this, Caretaker Shi replied casually. They didn't care, but Ren Baqin was very interested. Who arranged it? Which top 10 experts are they? Who else does Dayo have? I don't know who did it, but someone did it and then the news spread. I only knew about it because they would shout like that every time they came. Caretaker Shi sneered. It was obvious that he was very disdainful of these people's loud shouts that startled the entire city every time they came. However, Ren Baqin felt that he was unhappy with the fact that the other party's voice was louder than his. It said that His Majesty is ranked 7th, and the general who supports the nation, Hongwu, is ranked 9th. I'm not sure about the rest, but most of them are from Great Xia. There's one from the Yun nation and one from the Qin nation. Ren Baqin was overwhelmed with emotions as he listened. Which youngster didn't dream of becoming an expert? He had also been that age. Although he felt that he could only dream of becoming a peerless master, he could still shout 666 from the side. Even so, Ren Baqin was still very interested in the level of martial arts in this world. He didn't know if there was any mysterious chi or something like that. The two of them moved forward along with the crowd. When they passed by Beihong district, they could see that many of the mansions of the court officials on both sides of the street had their doors open. A few burly men were standing on stools looking forward. He could already see the palace walls when he raised his head. However, there were too many people, so he couldn't see where the challenger was. Many people stopped outside the square in front of the palace. However, with a group of burly men standing in front of him, Ren Baqin couldn't see anything. After jumping a few times, he finally saw a lone person standing in the square in front of the palace. Excuse me, Ren Baqin said as he tried to squeeze his way forward. However, he was pushed back by someone's butt. Damn it! Ren Baqin cursed. Just as Ren Baqin was hesitating whether he should shout out, "You pooped in your pants," the row of soldiers standing on top of the palace wall neatly parted to both sides. Soon after, a lady dressed in red appeared. Your Majesty. Yes, Your Majesty. The surrounding people shouted one after another. Their voices gathered together and soared into the sky. It seemed like this Empress was quite loved and respected by the people. It seems like Her Majesty is not in a good mood today, Caretaker Shi said. How do you know? Ren Baqin was curious. If Her Majesty is in a good mood, she won't bother with people who come to challenge her, Caretaker Shi said. Ren Baqin pondered for a long time. Did this mean that the Empress would vent her anger on them when she was in a bad mood and ignore them when she was in a good mood? Ren Baqin remembered Caretaker Shi mentioning that all the challengers last year were beaten to death. None of them survived. In other words, none of them came with the Empress in a good mood? Was he too unlucky, or did the Empress have too many bad moods? It was understandable that she was in a bad mood for 2 or 3 days a month, but she couldn't be in a bad mood every day, right? At the thought of this, Ren Baqin felt a chill on the back of his neck. Fortunately, he had not been executed the last few times he entered the palace. His luck was not bad. When the figure in front of the crowd saw the Empress appear at the top of the city wall, he immediately raised his voice and said, Qi Xiao, although you are the ruler of a nation, you are also one of the top 10 experts in the world. I Long Wanli, as a martial artist, have come to seek guidance from you. Please do not be stingy. Arrogant. How dare you shout the Empress's name? Someone in the crowd immediately scolded. How can you challenge the Empress whenever you want? You have to get past me first. A burly man strode out from the crowd with a huge saber in his hand. Me too. Both of you are too weak, let me do it. Do you want to test the sharpness of my saber? The burly man with the saber immediately glared back at him. He thought to himself that this sentence that he had just learned was indeed imposing. A few generals in the imperial court stepped forward one after another. After exchanging a few words, they started to undermine each other. Long Wanli was indifferent to the scolding and noise behind him. His gaze was fixed on the figure in red on top of the palace wall. At the same time, his aura was constantly rising. Before he came here, he had already challenged 19 experts and won all of them in one battle. His aura was at its sharpest. Some of the experts who were on his path of challenge avoided him one after another. Seeing this situation, he rode straight to the southwest and challenged one of the top 10 experts in the world when he was at his peak. He was also the one who was most likely to fight with him. As for the others, their whereabouts were uncertain, or they were in the midst of a large army. On the contrary, even though the Empress was an Empress, she had fought many times. In order to prevent the other party from refusing to fight, she specially challenged him as a martial artist. At this moment his fighting spirit was soaring and his aura was at its peak. Even those who were closer to him could feel the piercingly cold aura emitted from his body. It was as if he was an unparalleled sharp sword. With just one look, one could feel that his sharpness was unstoppable. Many people were affected by his aura and took a step back one after another. Even Rinpoche could feel the sharpness coming from the front. It was as if a saber was right in front of him, giving him a fright. What is this? Aura, fighting spirit, sword intent, who knows what it's called? Caretaker sure replied indifferently. Anyway, it's that thing. Rinpoche composed himself. Even though he was in the crowd and the other party's back was facing him, he still felt that as long as the other party willed it, he could lose his life at any time. This feeling of being on the brink of death was really terrible. It was so terrible that he couldn't help but touch the stun baton even though he knew that it was useless. The Empress, who was dressed in red, stood on top of the city gate tower and looked down. The corner of her mouth twitched slightly and she hooked her finger downwards. If it was somewhere else and such a woman hooked her finger at them, many people would definitely let their imaginations run wild. However, at this moment, everyone present could feel a domineering aura emanating from the Empress. She can't even be bothered to talk to you. Come do it. Long Wanli's aura had already reached its peak. He was just waiting for the Empress's response. At this moment, the sword on his back was unsheathed with a clang sound and fell into his hand. His entire body transformed into a bolt of lightning and pierced towards the Empress. Everyone could feel his indomitable determination. Awesome and otherworldly fairy. Rinpoche could finally see clearly and was immediately amazed. He didn't know if it was the legendary man and sword become one, but at this moment the feeling that Long Wanli gave him was that he and his sword had become one. His entire body was emitting an endless sword intent. And this sword really made him feel as if it had flown from the heavens. Even Rinpoche was worried for the Empress on the palace wall. Although the Empress was indeed an expert, Rinpoche usually felt that she was a little aloof and had a somewhat oppressive aura. He didn't feel the Empress's strength at all. Therefore, when he saw this sword that seemed to have come from the heavens, Rinpoche couldn't help but feel a little worried. Facing this world-shocking sword, the Empress's expression didn't change at all. When the tip of the sword was directly in front of her, she stretched out her lily-white hand and lightly flicked it. Clang. A crisp sound was heard. The tip of the sword flew straight up into the sky. When the remaining half of the sword was also deflected, the lily-white hand directly imprinted on Long Wanli's chest. Immediately he flew back at a speed faster than when he came. Just as Rinpoche exclaimed in surprise, the other party flew back at a speed faster than when he left. Bang! Immediately gravel flew everywhere and dust filled the air. After a long time, when the dust had settled, a large pit appeared on the stone-paved ground. Long Wanli was already dead and all the bones in his body were broken. When the dust settled, the situation in the field was revealed. And the figure of the Empress on the palace wall had already disappeared. The crowd took a look and immediately dispersed with a hubbub. I thought he would be able to make one more move this time. I didn't expect him to die in one move. However, I finally got to see Her Majesty in action today. This guy is really too weak. I was looking forward to it for so long. Chapter 53. That's it. As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, he felt someone fall to the side, almost pressing him to the ground. Caretaker Sure? What happened to you? Rinpoche held on to Caretaker Sure and asked in astonishment. Just now, Caretaker Sure was still fine. Why did he suddenly become like this? Caretaker Sure's face trembled. He was speechless for a long time. You got a heart attack because you were too excited just now? Or cerebral infarction? Rinpoche was a little anxious. Caretaker Sure was a good person. He did not want to see anything happen to him. However, upon closer inspection, Caretaker Sure did not look like he was suffering from a heart attack or cerebral infarction. Caretaker Sure was also fine. He was just glaring at Rinpoche with his face twitching. Looking at him, it looked like he had been electrocuted. Rinpoche was shocked when he thought of this. He lowered his head and saw that the stun baton was in his hand. He had subconsciously taken it out after being shocked by that person's imposing manner. Don't tell me I pressed the button and poked Caretaker Sure's body when I was nervous? At the thought of this, he looked at Caretaker Sure's condition again. The more he looked, the more he felt that he had been electrocuted by Professor Yang. Rinpoche stuffed the stun baton back to his waist and hurriedly helped Caretaker Shi to sit at the side with an awkward expression on his face. After a long while, Caretaker Shi finally recovered. He looked at Rinpoche as if he had seen a ghost and asked, "What did you poke my thigh with just now?" "A slip of the hand, a slip of the hand." Rinpoche laughed dryly. Just now he and Caretaker Shi were standing right next to each other. It was impossible for him to deny it even if he wanted to. "What exactly is it?" Caretaker Shi glared at Rinpoche. "This." Rinpoche laughed dryly and waved the stun baton in front of Caretaker Shi. He did not expect Caretaker Shi to snatch it away. "What is this?" Just now his whole body was numb and he couldn't move at all. "I can't even exert any strength now." Caretaker Shi fiddled with the electric baton with a curious look on his face. Although the electric baton was made of plastic, in his eyes, it was already very well made. "My sect's secret treasure, the stun baton," Rinpoche blurted out. "You have a master?" Caretaker Shi was surprised. "This is the first time I've heard you say that." Rinpoche didn't continue the conversation. He wouldn't be able to continue the conversation as it was originally a joke. "How do I use this thing?" Caretaker Shi continued to fiddle with the electric baton when he saw that Rinpoche did not answer him. "Press the button." As soon as Rinpoche finished speaking, his entire body started trembling. Then he directly fell to the ground. He finally knew what it felt like to be electrocuted. His entire body was numb and in pain. His stomach felt like it was on fire and he felt nauseous. This feeling was indeed refreshing. In his heart, he wanted to cry but had no tears. Sure enough, as the saying goes, a jar will not break without leaving the well, and a general will not die without leaving the horse. He had only been carrying this electric baton for a day, and he was already in trouble. Caretaker Shi lifted Rinpoche's neck and placed him at his side. After playing with the electric baton for a while with a cheerful look on his face, he self-consciously tucked it into his waist. "Brother Rin, I treat you well, right? I'll play with this thing and pass it to you in a few days," Caretaker Shi nagged beside Rinpoche. Rinpoche felt that he had encountered bandits. Caretaker Shi took about 5 minutes to recover from the electric shock, while Rinpoche took about 15 minutes to recover. Furthermore, Caretaker Shi only touched his body briefly before withdrawing the electric baton. When Rinpoche could finally move, Caretaker Shi patted his butt and stood up. He had a carefree look on his face. He did not hold a grudge against Rinpoche for poking him with the electric baton previously. Rinpoche got up from the ground and moved his arms and legs. He looked at the electric baton at Caretaker Shi's waist and weighed the difference in size between him and Caretaker Shi. He decided to buy a few more as backup after he returned. At this moment, a group of soldiers in front of the plaza were filling the huge pit with soil. When Rinpoche was placed at the side by Caretaker Shi, he could see the plaza. It seemed that no one had carried that person out. They actually buried him with soil. This made Rinpoche feel rather horrified. This act of destroying the corpse and destroying the evidence was too open and aboveboard. However, looking at the momentum of that person flying upside down and crashing onto the ground, he reckoned that even Astro Boy would be smashed into pieces, let alone a human body. Rinpoche had a deep understanding of the Empress's strength. She was definitely at the level of a Tyrannosaurus in human form. He did not know how she could be so powerful at her age. At the same time, he felt that it was a pity. That Long Wanli had a pretty good appearance. He was dressed in a green robe. Even though he could not see his face, he could feel that he was an elegant person just by looking at his back view. In particular, his sword was like a flying immortal. It was a pity that he was killed with a single slap. Now, even his corpse was buried under the plaza. "Why didn't you move the corpse to another place for burial?" Rinpoche asked. He felt awkward about burying corpses under the plaza. "Why? Burying the enemy's corpses under the ground will strengthen the fate of Dayo," Caretaker Shi said. He had to admit that this was the difference between the cultures of the two worlds. On Earth, if there were corpses buried under the ground, people would feel uncomfortable. But here they felt that it could strengthen the fate of Dayo. This made Rinpoche speechless. "Will someone come to take revenge?" Rinpoche asked again. "Just bury them together." Caretaker Shi laughed mischievously. He was completely unconcerned about Rinpoche's question. Not long after the two of them returned to the beast park, Rinpoche was summoned to the palace. The person who came to summon him was an acquaintance, Shi Hu. He had met him a few times before. "I want to present this to Her Majesty," Rinpoche said as he patted the air cooler. What is this? Sherhu was puzzled. Rinpoche pulled the cord of the air cooler. As the fan rotated, wind immediately blew out. Sherhu looked at it curiously and said, "It's much more convenient than using a fan." "Naturally," Rinpoche replied. Even though this thing wasn't very advanced and wasn't complicated to make, it was a new and interesting way of thinking that the ancients didn't have. Furthermore, the wind was natural, and the duration of the air cooler was much better than using a fan. Rinpoche carried the air cooler and followed Sherhu into the palace. They went straight to the imperial kitchen. "I'll go back and report to Her Majesty. She might summon you later," Sherhu said to Rinpoche before leaving. "Thank you." Rinpoche smiled. After entering the imperial kitchen, Rinpoche placed the air cooler at one side. A few cooks saw something novel and wanted to study it. However, they were all kicked away by Rinpoche. Everyone laughed and didn't seem to mind. Even though the people of Dayo had violent tendencies, they were rather straightforward after acknowledging him. They didn't mind some jokes. This made Rinpoche feel that they were pretty good. They were much easier to deal with than the people of the modern world. Even though they had only interacted a few times after taking out those seasonings and making a few new dishes, the cooks in the imperial kitchen had acknowledged Rinpoche wholeheartedly. If not for Her Majesty saying that she had other arrangements for Rinpoche, Caretaker Go would have wanted to transfer him to the imperial kitchen. Braised dragon scale fish. Rinpoche was sure that this was a carp with 2 extra whiskers. After it was done, Rinpoche tasted it. There wasn't any fishy smell at all. It melted in his mouth and was fresh and fragrant. He made up his mind to go to the market to buy a few more. Even if it was expensive, the taste was worth it. Sweet and sour pork, mushu pork and white fungus soup. After finishing the 4 dishes, Rinpoche went to take a rest. Even though the cooks in the imperial kitchen were in charge of making the dishes and he was in charge of mouthing them. Not long after the dishes were served, Sherhu came to the imperial kitchen to look for Rinpoche. "Her Majesty summons you in. Bring your box." Chapter 54. Me, that's a good thing. It means it's going to be popular. I didn't expect my book review section to be flooded one day. I'm a little excited just thinking about it. Once it's popular, I can get a new wife. Everyone knows that people don't necessarily say anything when they're in a daze. Especially when I wrote an old book until 4 in the morning and only slept for 3 hours. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.